Due to copyright, I can't publish many audiobooks on YouTube. At our audiobook novel service, we offer access to over 300 full novels from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, Wuxia, and more, all in high-quality audio format. Each novel is available with a one-time payment only. No subscriptions, no monthly payment, and no ads. Payments via PayPal or Ko-fi. To browse the full list of available novels, message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out our full catalog on Discord. Chapter 361 Home. Aside from the fact that the young lithe boy was backbroken and couldn't stand up, the shock of what he saw before him took so heavy a toll on him that he was just sitting there with a frozen look on his face. Ella's silence after seeing him made things a little bit awkward for Northern. While he had been on the journey, he didn't think he had taken quite the time. But now that he was back, it felt like he had been gone for years. Ellis had grown so much. He seemed to have more warmth to his skin tone. His face, although wounded, was now brimming with life and purpose. His hair was longer, but rough and dirty, and the armor he had on was better compared to the makeshift one he was wearing before. Jessie turned to Northern with a slight frown bearing down on her face. "My lord, should I dispose of this weakling?" Northern gave her a scowl and looked away. She went silent afterwards and did not say anything. Ellis, by the way, just stared down, lingered, then slowly raised his head. "Is it really you, Northern?" Northern gave him a small smile, one that sat sweetly on his pale and scathed face. "Yes, Ellis, no other Northern." Ellis heaved a huge sigh and shined his teeth, tightly shut. "I'm so glad you're back north. I missed you so much, we all did." Northern looked away, slightly pouting. "What's there to miss about me? It was not like I was a good guy." Now that he was back and reminiscing on his past here, Northern began to see how shortcoming he had been, all in the excuse to avoid being the center of attraction. But all that was enough right now. His face became serious as he asked Ellis, "Where are the others?" Ellis lingered a bit. As he tried to speak, he coughed and almost coughed out blood. Northern at that point stopped him and helped him up. "It's probably best if you don't talk now. Just lead the way to your rendezvous point." Ellis paused briefly, shocked. How does he know about that? A couple of things had been happening. The fact that Ellis was running through this forest had by no means been a coincidence. But Ellis did not expect Northern to know any of what was happening. He hesitated and then finally asked, "The rendezvous point, how did you know about it?" Northern placed Ellis' hands over his shoulder. "How else do you think I knew?" Ellis raised his brows as Northern continued. "Night Terror told me. Now, shut up and take me there." The lithe boy's lips trembled. "But there are lots of monsters. I don't see how we will bypass them without Sir Terror." Sir Terror. That was weird to hear, but Northern had other important matters to ask about. He sighed and explained. "I've dispersed my clones around the forest on my way here. I dealt with some myself before getting to this place." He turned his head to Jessie. "This woman here is also a very great fighter. I think she'll protect us very well, right?" Jessie nodded rigorously, her face reddening with excitement. Ellis looked down for a bit. His face was sort of melancholic, so Northern asked, "What?" He raised his head up slightly. "Your mansion. We lost it. A lot has happened before." "I know, Ellis, I know. Just take me to the rendezvous point." Ellis nodded and slowly started to lead Northern. Their walk was slow but progressive. Ellis took note of corpses of monsters with missing cores that lay around here and there as they pressed forward. There was no need for them to engage even once throughout their walk forward. And after a dozen minutes, they arrived at a clearing. The place was barricaded by a wooden gate. Despite being built amidst a forest, they were unharmed and untouched by monsters. However, there were crude markings, as if to warn off intruders of the cruelty that lived within the walls. By those markings alone, anyone that dared to trespass was bound to tremble back in fear, be it monster or human. "Night Terror," Northern murmured. Hearing him clearly, Ellis spoke. "After you guys left, things got dire. That bastard Braham, he kept coming after me. It was only thanks to Master Hao and Sir Terror that I survived this long. But the guy was very persistent." As if that was not enough, he betrayed the entire stronghold and sold us out to Sloria. To make things worse, there was another sudden rift shatter. Everything just happened so fast that we couldn't even get the time to save our skins. Ellis looked down. I was supposed to steal supplies from the delegates of Sloria that are here, since Savant Annette and the rest are preparing to venture into the rift. His hands trembled, but he clenched them. But I failed. Sir Terror suddenly disappeared. In my desperate attempt to shake off the pursuers, I decided to take the unterritorial route. I was chased, and then I had to discard the supplies so I can at least make it back alive. Northern patted the boy's back. It's fine. It's fine. This is a lot. He looked around and said, So, the monsters do not come around here because Night Terror marked the place? Ellis nodded. He marked the trees within 100 meters. Thanks to that, we are safe in this place and the Sloria people can't get to us. Northern nodded subtly and looked at the gate. So how do we get in? Ellis removed himself gently from Northern, then limped slowly towards the wooden gate, leaned on it and knocked 3 times, paused, knocked twice, paused and knocked 5 times. After that, the gate slowly opened and Ellis looked back with a gentle smile full of kind aura. I know it's not the best of states, but welcome home, Northern. Northern stared blank-faced as the inside of the makeshift shelter opened up to him. He muttered, unsure of the words even as he said it. Home? Chapter 362. A Happy Return. As the gate creaked open, the shelter came into Northern's view. Its rough-hewn wooden structures were enough to tell him that this place was hastily assembled. However, it was undeniably resilient. Northern felt his spit grow dry as Ellis said the word home. Had he at any time considered this place his home? Lothellowan? What the hell is he talking about home? Northern, dumbfounded with what Ellis just spurted, gave a dismissive look at the boy and stepped forward. The structures within the shelter were rugged and raw, their wooden frames crudely yet solidly built. The wood, aged and splintered, told stories of makeshift repairs. A central building stood out, its broad, sagging roof patched with mismatched shingles and pieces of tarp. Its walls, a haphazard mix of planks and logs, were braced with ropes and metal scraps. Surrounding this main structure were smaller shacks and lean-tos, each one a testament to survival and resourcefulness. Some were barely more than frames with tattered cloth or sheets of metal as walls, while others were slightly more enclosed, offering a modicum of privacy. The ground was uneven, a mix of dirt and scattered stones, with patches of wild grass pushing through. Groups of people who looked like they had been worn and battered by the relentless trials of life moved around with a determined grace. Their clothes were tattered, their faces lined with hardship, yet a spark of tenacity gleamed in their eyes. Despite their weary appearance, they carried on with a sense of purpose and camaraderie. Northern and Jessai followed Ellis closely behind. The people that walked around went about their business without paying any attention to the newcomers. That was indicative of how used they were to new people coming around. If only they knew that these weren't just new people. If only they knew Northern. Unlike Raven, Northern doubted if anyone amongst these people knew what he looked like or even his name. Soon they were at the central building. Ellis pushed the door of the walls, and together all 3 of them entered. Inside the walls of the central building, the people here looked more presentable than those outside. They were scattered around, some bandaged, around the head, hand, leg, leaning against the seemingly fragile wall. Northern raised a brow. From what he had seen of Night Terror's memories, he knew that Lothellowan had been divided into 2 factions. One was being led by Braham and the delegates of Sloria, the other was being led by Annette and Night Terror. Those were the 2 main factions that were currently warring against each other. But there was one more faction. Northern decided to call them the Hiding Faction, led by Gilbert and some of the party leaders. Of course, there were some party leaders here too and some with Braham. Northern was even more surprised to find out that Ryan and Arlem were in this faction. He didn't think that those 2, most especially, would be here after their fight with Night Terror. Why would they choose to serve him? He was not able to get what had inspired their decision from Night Terror's memory. There were a couple of other things he was unable to get to, which was why he still needed more information. Hence, he would allow Annette to explain everything to him from the beginning and look at the whole narrative from her own point of view. Northern glanced around and entered the building. He came into a not-so-large hall, but it was large enough to accommodate a long table with Annette and a few other people without feeling cozy. Annette was surrounded by them and seemed to be talking to them. As he, Ellis, and Jessie entered, her eyes drifted towards the entrance and immediately widened. Immediately followed was a broad, maniacal grin. She rudely burst through the people in front of her and hurtled towards Northern. Upon reaching his front, she pulled him into her bosom and wrapped her hands around him. Northern found it so hard to breathe as Annette stuffed his face into her breasts. He forced himself away from her and glared. I never thought a day would come that I would be so happy to see you," Annette said. Slowly, though, she began to feel the room temperature rise. She subconsciously wiped her forehead, only to realize she was sweating. Frozen for a moment, she looked at her hand and then at Northern. Behind Northern was a dark-haired lady. Fuming, she darted a strong, vicious scowl at Annette. Her essence was all over the place and affecting the room. Northern gave her a side-eye. "Hey!" Immediately Jessie closed her eyes and breathed out. She bowed her head and said, "I apologize." Annette instantly felt the temperature in the room drop rapidly immediately after the lady apologized. She then took another look at the lady, her armor. Then a frown creased her brow. "Hey Northie, do you know who that is?" Northern looked at her. "No need to get all edgy. I know, and she can't harm anyone." "Northie, you don't—" "Should this be what we are talking about right now?" he interrupted her. Annette froze, observed him and smiled broadly again. "You're right. That's not even what should be on our lips right now. Come. I'll introduce you to everyone and keep you up to speed on things." Annette walked back to the group of people who were now looking at her and the white-haired boy. "Please care to treat Ellis first." He received a critical hit. Ellis was surprised. "Where did that come from?" Northern looked at him. "What? I don't want your back breaking when I just came back to use you." Ellis smiled sweetly. "Of course. I will get treated. I think you should talk to Annette first." Northern then moved forward. He could recognize some faces, such as Arlem, who was standing with his hands folded, muscles coiling beneath his skin like they were alive. Ryan was standing behind Arlem, gaze distant and lost, but radiating a cold air of power. I still look forward to copying his talent. There were other people such as Vita, the dark-skinned lady with a gorgeous, voluptuous body, which seemed to have gotten even better. Like the state of this desolation just did not have any effect on her. The others looked young as him, some a little bit older, and Annette was the one leading all of them. Annette, after reaching amidst them, looked at Northern, lingered, then said, "This is Northern. Well, there are a lot of things I can say about him, but I guess the first thing I'll have you know is, he is the master of our monster hero." All their faces went blank. Annette repeated proudly, "Yep, this is the Dark Terror's master." Even Northern was shocked. Chapter 363. The Fall of Lothelwyn, Part 1. Northern frowned at Annette immediately as she spoke, but she grinned at his face and looked away. The others were still finding it so hard to believe. They muttered among each other, giving Northern glances. One of them, however, stepped forward to Northern's front and looked down on him. Arlem boasted of a much larger and taller body than Northern. Standing directly in front of the white-haired boy, he looked like an older person than he was. Northern scowled and looked up to his face, wrinkling his nose a little bit. "You have a strong monster." "I know," Northern responded silently, even though Arlem had shouted. The guy had a lousy nature to himself. Humph, you are doing well." He tapped Northern's shoulder like he was some elderly folk and walked back. Ryan glanced at Northern and that was it. Before the others could start approaching him, Annette cleared her throat, grabbing their attention. "I need to keep Northern up to speed on our state of things. Please give us some privacy." They all began to walk out after she spoke. After a while, The only people that were left in the room were Annette and Northern. She looked at him for a few seconds before she smiled and started. First of all, I am now a savant, and I probably will become a sage with this next rift. Ha! It feels so nice. There's no better time to have you. Remember you promised to go into a rift with me? Northern raised a brow. I did. Yes, you did. But let's leave that for now. I know you are very curious as to the state you have found us. Northern crossed his arms over his chest and sat carefully on the table behind, looking at Annette. Whatever you are about to tell me, I honestly hope it features how the hell you lost my estate. Ah, that. Annette scratched the back of her hair with an awkward laughter. Meanwhile, Northern just glared at her. So this problem all started with Braham, she sighed. I've always known Braham to be a serious problem. All of us have always known, but he was too valuable to develop. In this entire stronghold, he is the only one with a healing ability. Not to say, his ability is so strong that he could heal in a single instance. Before now though, he had never been a problem, because Raven was there to put him under control. Her presence alone intimidated him tons. But then she disappeared along with him and Braham suddenly grew 5 balls. She paused and looked at Northern. You've been with her all this while, haven't you? Where is she? Do you think you can convince her to join this faction? Northern glared at her intensely, making her return to her main point of conversation. She cleared her throat and commented. That was just by the way anyways. When Raven left, Braham came after Ellis with some natives of Lothellowan, his thugs. They got into a serious fight with Howe. Things got tough. A monster came to their rescue, beat all of them to the point of death. She gave Northern an extra look as she continued. As you know, this monster has been something the party leaders had already been concerning themselves with. So, things went up quickly. After seeing the state of the thugs and Braham, subduing the monster became a priority. Well, it did not go well for any of the party leaders. Ellis reached out to me in all of this, warned me not to go against the monster. I couldn't understand what he was saying and was on the verge of thinking he had something to do with all of this. Eventually, after pressuring him, he told me the truth. Of course, he did. That wimp, Northern muttered. Don't blame him. There was a lot of pressure and that was the best call for the situation. If he hadn't, things would have escalated out of control. Do you think your monster is invincible? Northern's lips curled smugly. You fool, Annette said, seeing the cocky smile on his face. The only reason why anyone would probably have a chance against him is because I ordered him not to kill. Annette raised her head up and laughed a little bit. Then she shot Northern a glare. Don't be too full of yourself, Northern. Remember we are drifters and we exist to subdue monsters. Kill them. That thing is a monster. It would have died if it wasn't for me. Oh? Tell me about it. After Ellis told me about it, I told others. I told them it was a summon and it had a master and was acting for a reason. As long as we back away from Ellis, it wouldn't bother us. After much back and forth defeat from the monster, eventually the party leaders had to opt for my suggestion. We backed away and thus did the monster. However, Braham did not like this development. He wanted Ellis at all cost. Northern grimaced. Why? Annette looked at him seriously and retorted. That guy is a bastard, a noble bastard, too proud even in a world as desolate as this. He would resort to foolish means just to satisfy his ego and exercise unnecessary power. No doubt he has values, but that fact has gone before and ruined his mind. She breathed, almost heaving with anger but controlled her breath and said. He began to get very bothersome, said he will use his own means to get the boy. Hence he tried to kidnap Ellis while he was asleep, but was dealt with by your monster wolf. Mr. Fluffy? Northern smiled, touching his jaw. So Braham got done in twice. That's satisfying. Annette continued. Well, turned out Braham had been in contact with the Sloria stronghold, feeding them information about us in exchange for items, supplies. He was amassing riches of his own. Northern's look got serious. Amassing riches of his own? Why? Man beats me. I don't know too. The only thing I can think of was so that he could enter Lewingard. Do you need riches to enter Lewingard? If that was the case, wouldn't those from Slora Stronghold have entered already? Annette answered, I don't know too. I told you I don't know. But the worst came. Sloria drifters started attacking us. Chapter 364. The Fall of Lothelwyn Part 2. They started attacking you guys? Why? Obviously because Braham told them that we were harboring a monster. A monster that could understand and communicate with humans. Northern narrowed his eyes. He lied? How more wretched could he be? Annette was silent for a few seconds, squarely looking at Northern. Northern returned the gaze gesture and questioned. What? Didn't he? She shook her head subtly. No, he didn't. She then squinted her eyes. Northern, have you seen Mr. Fluffy since you came back? Northern shook his head. No, I haven't. I just came back and came here straight. Annette then slowly nodded. I see, that's why. That's why what? She raised her face to him and gave him her intense fiery glare. Your monster wolf has grown. Really grown. And although it can't speak with us, it clearly understands us. Northern thought for a while. He didn't think anything was wrong with that. Even from when they were in the rift, Mr. Fluffy clearly could understand him and acted on his commands. Could that be factored into a level of communication that anyone needs to be concerned with? I'm not sure if we are even on the same page here. Annette breathed and explained with slight hand gestures that seemed to give life to her words. What I'm saying is your monster wolf relates with people on a fantastic level. And responds with growls. That thing is literally Ella's best friend. It also runs errands. It's a friend of everyone. Northern nodded. I guess that's a big problem. But why should the Sloria Stronghold bother themselves with this? Annette was silent. Her fiery eyes rested on Northern. Before she continued, saying, See, I have never said this to you, but Sloria has a very big backing. Lewingard Empire, I guess? So you know about that. Annette, startled, almost stumbled back. How do you even know that? Northern shrugged slightly. Well, a lot has happened. Annette observed him with suspicious eyes. For how long you guys were gone? A lot has to have happened. Northern suddenly asked her. Sorry, how long were we gone? You don't know? She pointed 2 fingers. You guys were gone for 2 whole months. Ah, I see. It isn't as much as I had actually expected it would have been. So in that 2 months you became a savant and almost even broke out of it? I don't assume fighting drifters is what earned you that achievement. Annette smiled in fervent satisfaction. Calm down and let me get there. She continued. The Empire was the one that concerned themselves with the matters of monsters. I wasn't sure. After Braham reported Mr. Fluffy's existence to Sloria, they attacked us and asked us to submit the monster to them. Then they would allow us to join them. At this point, Fluffy was beginning to relate with everyone. Some were going to do it while some opposed. It caused another serious battle of separation. We really got done in by the drifters of Sloria, and Mr. Fluffy was close to being kidnapped by a certain individual. I doubt you'll know him, he goes by the name Zephyr. Then Night Terror came, fought him and almost died. But guess who saved your monster? Ryan, Arlem, Vita, and I. She sounded like she was boasting. Northern's blank gaze stayed glued to her face. Someone almost killed Night Terror? The news came as very shocking and made him question for the first time. Night Terror is a void summon. What will happen should he die? Northern felt his shoulders tremble. His spit suddenly dried out as he gulped. The point Annette was trying to make earlier finally settled in. He looked at her and exhaled shakily. Thank you. Night Terror is his strongest asset. Losing that monster would be a huge blow to his soul. Annette smiled delightfully. You are welcome. She lingered for a few beats before she continued her story. After things went down that way, Mr. Fluffy returned to the mansion and refused to leave. While Sloria surrounded the mansion and were going to set it on fire. They either had the monster or killed it. She sighed. Remembering it seemed to make her even anxious. We begged your monster to leave. It refused. The mansion was burning and that darned monster was not going to leave. Ellis was begging it to leave, but it refused and stayed in that attic room in that mansion. Eventually, Night Terror came and forcefully dragged it out. While running away from the warriors from Sloria, we found this place. Night Terror marked it to keep the monsters away, and after a month and a half we were able to erect these structures. Of course, with great help from Mr. Fluffy, Night Terror, and How. Northern swallowed what was left of his spit and clenched his hands. He was feeling very angry. Annette looked at him and ascertained again. So, it's not like we lost your estate. It was burnt by Sloria. Northern let out a steamy breath and said, so all of this was caused by Braham and Sloria. Moreover, Mr. Fluffy was almost killed while protecting my manor. I guess that's a way to put it. Where's Mr. Fluffy right now? If he wasn't with Ellis, that means he is running rounds with Percival. Northern shifted his head slightly. Who is that? I don't know how the guy does it, but he and Mr. Fluffy's bond is on a whole other level. Could even make you jealous. So when will they be around? Very soon. Northern turned away but was stopped by Annette's voice. We have more important things to face than this matter. I am planning to enter one of the 4 cardinal rifts. Night Terror and all of us have been training for that purpose. We have killed a lot of monsters and thus came the growth. Northern nodded. His back was still turned against her. She frowned a little bit and asked him, Northern, are you fine? Yes, I am. What are you going to do after now? Wait for Mr. Fluffy, he retorted. Then, he looked back over his shoulders with a very dark grimace. Then I'm gonna burn the whole of Sloria stronghold down. Chapter 365. The Big White Ferocious Beast. Northern sat cross-legged in a small tent and greedily tore at a roasted meat. He gulped water from a brown hide, paused a little, taking his time to swallow before he continued with the meat. Throughout, Ellis stared at him. Small, calm down and eat slowly. The food is not running away, you know? Northern nodded and spoke with a muffled voice, a lot of meat in his mouth. I've not eaten for long. It's been so long. The last time Northern probably had something to eat was when he was in the rift. From when that night he got kidnapped till now, he had not eaten anything. And only got conscious of it when he smelled a roasted monster meat. Jessie was seated behind him with her legs and arms also crossed. Her eyes were closed and she was silent. Ellis stole a glance, silently shifted towards Northern and asked, Who is she? Northern waved his hand dismissively and continued his meat. When he was done with the meat, he slurped the side of the bone with his tongue and finally abandoned it. Then he leaned back with his hands as support and exhaled in deep satisfaction. After not eating for probably 4 days, that was more than enough to make him even burp. I'm really glad you are back. What of Lady Raven, is she fine? Did harm do her at any point? Northern raised his head and sneered at him. Ellis swallowed the rest of what it looked like he was about to say and looked down in small shame. He looked up at Northern and quickly looked down again when he saw that Northern's sneer persisted. After a few awkward seconds in silence, he raised his voice in protest. I mean, I was just worried about her, you know? Northern nodded his head. Understandable. Don't just ask me. You can go find her yourself. I wonder why they are not here yet though. Jessie opened her eyes and looked at Northern and Ellis, then closed them back. What about How anyway? I've not seen him. Ellis looked down, his eyes somber. What's wrong? Northern pressed, slightly frowning upon seeing the boy's expression. How was taken by the Sloria delegates. But we know he is alive. He is too valuable to be killed. Northern lowered his head, looking down with his frown getting darker. I see. His voice went on a pause for a couple of heartbeats before coming back. So, where is he being held? They have probably taken him to their stronghold. Northern nodded. I guess that's convenient. Ellis looked at him, lingered, then asked, What do you mean? Northern sighed and stood himself up, then said to Ellis as he walked out of the tent, Come show me around. The forest reverberated with the sound of snapping twigs and rustling leaves as an enormous white beast, its fur a stark contrast against the dark foliage, darted through the forest. Its piercing blue eyes glowed with a fierce intensity, every sinew of its powerful body rippling with controlled aggression. On its back, a young man with closed, small slant eyes and packed, upward spiky hair clung tightly, his gaze sharp and unwavering. With a mighty leap, the beast soared over a fallen tree, its claws digging into the soft earth as it landed gracefully. Ahead, the ox-headed monsters, massive and menacing, lumbered into view, their heavy footfalls shaking the ground. The beast didn't hesitate. It surged forward, a blur of white fur and lethal intent. The first monster barely had time to raise its club before the beast was upon it, jaws snapping with a bone-crunching force. The monster roared in pain as the beast's teeth tore through its thick hide, blood spraying in a gruesome arc. The young man on the wolf's back moved with calculated precision, his movements fluid and controlled, guiding the wolf with subtle shifts of his weight. Both of them were like a fluid flow of oil, synchronizing perfectly with each other. Another monster charged, its horns aimed at the wolf's flank, but the beast was faster. It twisted mid-air, evading the attack and lunging at the monster's exposed neck. With a savage growl, it clamped down, shaking its head violently until the monster's body went limp. Guttural roars of the monsters crawled from the depth of the silent forest, only to be met by a ferocious snarl of the beast. The young man's presence atop the beast was a striking image of calm amid the storm, his eyes narrowing in focus as he directed the beast towards the next foe. "Mr. Fluffy, forward!" he shouted. Mr. Fluffy surged forward immediately the guy spoke, each of its powerful strides eating up the ground between them and their foes. The young man's fingers tightened in Mr. Fluffy's ruff, as the beast thumped forward. More of the monsters plunged out of different sides of the forest, but the big white beast seemed unbothered, as did its rider. Mr. Fluffy's ears flattened against his skull, his lips curling back to reveal rows of gleaming fangs. A low growl rumbled from deep within his chest, a primal sound that sent shivers through the very air. The closest monster swung an axe in a wide arc. The young man's eyes narrowed, calculating trajectory and speed in an instant. With a subtle shift of his body, he guided Mr. Fluffy into a tight roll. The axe whistled harmlessly overhead as beast and rider spun beneath it. In the same fluid motion, Mr. Fluffy twisted, using his momentum to launch himself at the monster's exposed flank. His claws raked across tough hide, leaving deep furrows that welled with dark blood. The monster roared in pain and fury, its stubby fingers fumbling to grab at the beast. But Mr. Fluffy was already gone, a white blur darting across the creature. The young man clung tightly, his body low against Mr. Fluffy's back. The forest whirled around them in a dizzying kaleidoscope of dark, green and brown. The tang of sap from broken branches filled the air, mingling with the copper scent of fresh blood. Another monster charged, its bovine head lowered, razor-sharp horns aimed straight for them. Mr. Fluffy's muscles bunched beneath his rider. The young man perspired as he felt the surge of power, anticipating the coming leap. With explosive force, Mr. Fluffy sprang upward. They soared over the charging monster, so close that the young man could see the surprise in its beady eyes. Time seemed to slow as they hung suspended in the air, the forest stretching out beneath them. Then gravity reasserted itself. Mr. Fluffy twisted in mid-air. They landed hard on the monster's broad back, claws digging in for purchase. The beast bellowed, bucking and twisting to dislodge them. But Mr. Fluffy held fast, his jaws clamping down on the thick neck. The young man leaned close, with a dagger appearing in his hands as he extended his limb and stabbed the dagger brutally into the monster's back. Followed by that was a savage shake of his head. Mr. Fluffy tore out the monster's throat. Hot blood sprayed, staining white fur black. The massive body crashed to the ground, sending tremors through the earth. However, there was no time to savor the victory. Two more ox-headed creatures lumbered towards them, their heavy weapons raised high. Mr. Fluffy's chest heaved, his breaths coming in rapid pants. But his eyes still blazed with fierce determination. The young man patted his neck, feeling the wolf's racing pulse beneath his palm. "Just 2 more, buddy," he murmured. "We can do this." Mr. Fluffy's ear twitched at the sound of his voice. He crouched low, muscles coiling like springs. The monsters approached cautiously now, wary of the deadly duo that had felled their brethren. Tension crackled in the air like static electricity. Leaves rustled in a sudden breeze, carrying the metallic scent of an approaching storm. The monsters paused for a couple of seconds, then suddenly lunged themselves, attacking as one, their clubs descending in a devastating downward strike. But Mr. Fluffy was already moving, a white phantom darting between the massive bodies. His teeth flashed, tearing at exposed flesh. Blood flowed freely, staining the forest floor. The young man clung tightly and ducked beneath flailing limbs, leading Mr. Fluffy with the slightest touch. Together, they were a whirlwind of fur and fangs, striking and retreating before the lumbering monsters could retaliate. One monster fell, its leg hamstrung by Mr. Fluffy's razor-sharp claws. It crashed to the ground with an earth-shaking impact, trees trembling from the force. The other one roared in fury, swinging its axe wildly. Mr. Fluffy danced away from the attack. His movements, while still graceful, lacked their earlier explosive power. The young man could feel the beast's sides heaving beneath him. Each breath was a labored gasp. The remaining monster pressed its advantage, backing the duo against a massive tree. Its beady eyes gleamed with malevolent triumph as it raised its axe for a final, crushing blow. Time seemed to slow. The young man's heart thundered in his chest, matching the rapid pulse he could feel thrumming through Mr. Fluffy's body. The monster's muscles bulged as it began its downward swing. In that frozen moment, the young man grinned. He leaned close to Mr. Fluffy's ear, whispering a single word. "Now!" With a powerful and explosive surge, Mr. Fluffy leaped. Not away from the monster, but towards it. They collided with the ox-headed creature in mid-swing, throwing off its aim. The axe delved into the oak behind them, sending splinters flying. Before the monster could recover, Mr. Fluffy's jaws clamped onto its throat. The young man added his weight to the attack, pressing down with all his might. Together they bore the creature to the ground. The monster thrashed and bellowed, its cries growing weaker as Mr. Fluffy's teeth sank deeper. With a final, rattling gasp, it went still. Silence fell over the forest. The only sounds were the ragged pants of Mr. Fluffy and the young man, and the soft patter of blood dripping from the wolf's fur. Slowly, carefully, the young man slid from Mr. Fluffy's back. His legs trembled as they touched the ground, muscles protesting after the intense battle. He leaned against the beast, burying his face in his fur. Mr. Fluffy turned his head, gently nuzzling the young man's hair. His tongue lolled out, a wolfish grin of triumph despite his exhaustion. The young man laughed softly, the sound filled with relief and exhilaration. He scratched behind Mr. Fluffy's ears, eliciting a contented rumble from the massive beast. "Good boy," he murmured. "The best boy." However, the beast slowly sniffed the air. Mr. Fluffy's eyes suddenly swung open and he shot to his feet, legs strong gripping against the ground. Percival staggered back, confused by the sudden act of the beast. Without a word to Percival, Mr. Fluffy darted forward with explosive speed. Chapter 366. The Beautiful Reunion. The ground trembled as Mr. Fluffy took a fast, powerful stride forward. Percival had tried to catch up with the monster but was long away from doing so. At some point, he just dropped to his butt, heaving, while he watched Mr. Fluffy disappear into the distance, thinking, what could have happened? He has never been like this before. From the moment Mr. Fluffy had begun to socialize up until now, there had never been a worrying moment with the fact that he was essentially a monster who should not be living amongst humans. It was like the beast had a compelling understanding of human society, had compassion, kindness, empathy, and love. These by all circumstances were not qualities a monster should have. and it even grew more evident in him as he continued to spend time with them. Until now, when the entire shelter trusts Mr. Fluffy so much that they don't worry with him around. He and Night Terror often walk amidst the shelter like heroes. Although strangely, the two of them do not get along quite well. Percival heaved a final sigh as he watched the trails the beast left behind. He scratched the side of his brow and slumped to the ground, groaning. The tiredness from the fight from earlier still hit hard. And he was only riding. He couldn't help but imagine how tired Mr. Fluffy must feel. Of course, the beast clearly boasted superior stamina than humans. We've been running rounds since morning, clearing monsters. He'd still be tired. Meanwhile, Mr. Fluffy, as he approached the clearing that housed the shelter, did not wait for the wooden gate to open. He ran on the walls and leaped over, landing powerfully on the inside ground with a powerful thud. Every busy person paused and turned their heads to see where the ground-shaking sound had come from. On seeing Mr. Fluffy, they turned back to whatever it was they were doing. The beast, ignorant of the hassle it had caused just now, slowly moved forward, sniffing the air and following a particular but invisible trail. He divided his way through the throng of ragged people and finally saw the back of a man with long white hair, donned in off-white armor and brown leather. Immediately, Mr. Fluffy sat down as the person turned. Although he had no tail, his butt looked like it was almost dancing to the left and right. A delightful smile split Northern's face as his eyes settled on the massive, wolfish beast sitting in front of him. As the awe-striking image of Mr. Fluffy settled into his head, he took a step back to reassess the monster. Mr. Fluffy? Upon hearing his master call his name, Mr. Fluffy growled lowly, thickly. His tone was mixed with a somewhat notable feel of happiness. A pensive silence existed between the two but did not even last a second before both of them jumped into the embrace of each other, Northern burying his face into the monster's fur. Mr. Fluffy was now so big that Northern had to look up to look at his face. Not to talk of the beast's teeth. They had become so large and fierce. His eyes were now glowing with a cold ferocity, hidden within their blue depth, and were a somewhat deeper, darker contrast of blue from what he last saw. Mr. Fluffy had changed in so many ways, and Northern was just filled with so much shock and surprises that he couldn't stop staring, leaving his mouth slightly hung open. The obedient beast judiciously sat in front of him, eyes sparkling. Northern smiled and buried his hand into the beast's fur and scratched it enjoyably. This caused Mr. Fluffy to reposition his head slightly upward, shaking one of his legs as he enjoyed the sweet sensation. When Northern stopped, he leaned his head forward and licked Northern's face with his large salivate tongue. Northern almost stumbled back from the slightly powerful force of the monster. He turned his back and looked at Ellis, then said, "I'll be back in a little time." Immediately, he threw himself over the beast's back and leaned closer to him. "I don't know if you are familiar with who How is, but you and I are going to go on a rescue mission." Northern paused, smiling for a bit. "And we are going to pay back those bastards that burned my mansion and tried to burn you with it." After his whisper, the beast let out a low, vibrating, and intimidating growl. Northern tapped him with a very satisfied grin and commanded, "Go!" Mr. Fluffy plunged into the air. With just one super-powerful leap, he crossed the little distance and flew over the wall, landing outside the shelter, then plunged into the forest. Ellis stared in a dizzying mixture of surprise and dismay. Northern had just blasted off with Mr. Fluffy, and if he heard quite well, to rescue How. Immediately, he turned his frail legs around and dashed towards the building. Immediately he entered, he reported to Annette with a quick shout. "Northern has left the shelter with Mr. Fluffy." Annette, who was at the table with the same people from earlier, they seemed to be planning something, swung her head up and frowned slightly. She gritted her teeth and suppressed the curses that swelled from her throat. "That guy, I just can't believe." She looked at the others and said to them, "This takes priority. We need to go after him as far as we can." Arlem folded his hands and calmly spoke. "Do we, though?" Annette looked at him. A pressuring dark expression settled on her face, but it wasn't a frown. "What did you say?" Arlem cleared up his throat and spoke louder. I'm just saying this is a very strong person, I presume. If he is the terror's master, then he must be pretty strong. Would he need our help? Annette was silent for a few seconds. She looked down and seemed to be lost in her thoughts for those seconds. Then she returned her fiery eyes to Arlem. After finding her words, Northern is the last vestige of common sense I have to hold on to. Call me sentimental, but having known him before coming here, I have developed a sense of favoritism towards him. My decision to go after him is not dependent on how strong he is. She looked fiercely at all of them and added, and it's also not mandatory for any of you to come with me. He is my student. If he is diving into trouble, it's only right that I save him from it. She turned around and walked past Ellis going out of the building. A dark-skinned lady immediately followed her. Ellis looked at the others, a slight confused frown appearing on his face. He gulped and finally went out too. Chapter 367. Creatures of Nightmares. Northern and Mr. Fluffy hurtled across the forest scape, not minding a single monster around. For those that dared to enter their path, they were met with the crude and vicious claw of the white beast, marking their end in a ghastly spray of gore. A couple of minutes passed, and they eventually came out of the forest. Mr. Fluffy drifted, skidding to a halt for a brief moment, allowing Northern to get his bearings. Northern's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the landscape before them. Rolling hills stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with clusters of trees and crisscrossed by winding paths. This was a path of Lothellowan he wasn't used to, but it wasn't so difficult. After all, he could see so far to know that the desert plains of Sloria were just ahead. All that's left is to just find a path there, or better still, force one out if he has to. Northern leaned close to Mr. Fluffy's ear. All right, buddy. Let's move forward. The wolf's ears twitched in response. Without hesitation, Mr. Fluffy surged forward again, his powerful legs propelling him across the open terrain. The grasslands blurred beneath them, the ground a fleeting memory as they raced towards their destination. The wind whipped through Northern's hair, his eyes slits of determination as he clung to his steed. As they approached the outskirts of the city, the scenery shifted once more. The forest reclaimed its dominance, trees arching overhead to form a natural gateway. Shadows danced along the forest floor, the light filtering through the leaves casting an ethereal glow. Mr. Fluffy navigated the dense foliage with practiced ease, his movements fluid and precise. His pace never faltered as they plunged into the woods. Branches whipped past, leaving thin scratches on Northern's arms. The beast ducked and weaved through the underbrush, following a path only he could sense. The forest grew denser, the canopy overhead blocking out most of the daystar's light. An eerie quiet settled over them, broken only by the soft thud of Mr. Fluffy's paws and his rhythmic panting. Suddenly, the trees parted, revealing a wide, rushing river. The water frothed and churned, its surface broken by jagged rocks. On the far bank, a desert path continued, winding its way up a steep hill. Northern patted Mr. Fluffy's neck, preparing for the leap across. But as the beast gathered himself to spring, a bone-chilling howl split the air. Northern immediately sensed it and narrowed his eyes. Something is coming. He turned the beast around to face the forest, cautiously anticipating whatever it was that was coming out of the forest. And from the shadows of the forest emerged a creature of nightmares. It stood easily twice Mr. Fluffy's height, casting a long shadow over them. Its body was a twisted amalgamation of wolf and bear. Matted fur covered its muscular frame, marred by countless scars. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural yellow light, fixed hungrily on the pair before it. Mr. Fluffy's eyes narrowed fiercely at the threat, hackles rising as a low growl rumbled from his chest. Northern's hand instinctively tightened in the wolf's fur, 1,000 things running across his mind. But amidst it all, he couldn't deny the unwavering sense of peace and calmness that sat within his chest. Like he just knew. He couldn't lose. There was this surreal sync between him and Mr. Fluffy that gave him an outright understanding of the monster's capabilities and made his own capabilities very understanding to the monster itself. Maybe that was why Mr. Fluffy seemed even cockier than he had been when he was facing other monsters. But something worried Northern still. The monsters in this vicinity are all known into 4 main categories. I have never heard or seen one looking so grotesque and huge before. This left an open room for a lot of suspicion for Northern, but then again, he thought about the monster in the depth of the river. The worm and the crazy monster in the sleeping mountains. Those were also all accounted for. But at the very least, this one had not been there a couple of months ago when he and Raven passed. And he had come in through this route too, although he ran so fast and it wasn't exactly the same path. Shouldn't I have felt it at least if he was here? Northern's mind went back and forth of what to think, but alas, he decided to kill it first before worrying. As if sensing consent in Northern's cold eyes, the monster charged, with surprising speed for its bulk. Mr. Fluffy waited until the last moment before darting aside, his claws leaving deep gouges in the earth. The creature's momentum carried it past them, giving Northern a chance to assess their foe even better. Wicked claws adorned its massive paws, each easily as long as Northern's forearm. Yellowed fangs protruded from its elongated snout, dripping with foul-smelling saliva. But most terrifying were its eyes, intelligent and filled with malevolent hunger. The monster wheeled around, letting out another ear-splitting howl. This time, answering cries echoed from the forest. More glowing eyes appeared in the gloom, surrounding Northern and Mr. Fluffy. Northern's mouth slowly opened. There were more, and I didn't even sense them? Okay, crap, I think I need to evolve this soul eyes. He sighed. And I thought I could make anything evolving wait after I become a master. I guess I'll have to make an exception with this one. Looks like we've got a fight on our hands, buddy? Northern murmured, caressing the beast's furs playfully. He didn't even look bothered about the situation, not even in the slightest manner. Mr. Fluffy's only response was to bunch his muscles, ready to spring in any direction. The air crackled with tension as predator and prey sized each other up. The lead monster made the first move, lunging forward with surprising agility. Its claws slashed through the air where Mr. Fluffy had been a split second before. The white beast danced away, retaliating with a quick snap at the creature's flank. Blood welled from the wound, but the monster seemed unfazed. It pressed its attack, forcing Mr. Fluffy closer to the churning river. The other monsters closed in, cutting off any chance of escape. Northern leaned close to Mr. Fluffy's ear. "Hey buddy," he whispered. "Head for the river. I want to see how desperate these bastards are. If not too desperate, we can always come back to deal with them. I actually want to see if there is a new rift around. If they are still here by the time I come back, then I suppose there's a new rift that no one has noticed. If not, well, then this is just suspicious as hell." The beast's ear twitched in acknowledgement. He feinted left, drawing the lead monster's attention, then suddenly spun and leaped towards the river. Time seemed to slow as they soared over the rushing current. Northern could see every droplet of water, feel the spray on his face. Behind them, the monsters roared in fury. Mr. Fluffy's paws hit the far bank, scrabbling for purchase on the slick rocks. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed they might slip back into the churning waters. Then, with a mighty heave, the beast pulled them to safety. But their reprieve was short-lived. The monsters, driven by unnatural madness, plunged into the river after them. Something from within drew two down immediately, their howls of rage turning to gurgles as they disappeared beneath the frothing surface. The lead monster, however, was not so easily deterred. Its powerful limbs cut through the water, propelling it towards the far shore with terrifying speed. Chapter 368. Eternal Chaos. Northern looked at them as they all hurtled towards the bank of the river where he was with Mr. Fluffy, and he couldn't help but think, "Damn, they are quite desperate, aren't they?" Northern had a dark expression on his face as they got closer. He slowly slid down from Mr. Fluffy and gently patted the beast. "Buddy, you sit out this one. I know you want to show me how much you have grown. But I also know you're tired." He smiled and faced the monsters. "Let me show you how much I have grown." He extended both his arms and folded them into fists, then pushed one leg forward, subconsciously muttering, "Chaotic footstep." "There's something I've been thinking about ever since I used Chaos Sword Art with Jengar." Northern breathed steadily and circled his hands in the air, slowly coating them with ominous black flames. "It's called a sword art, but the kind of synchronization and force I got from using it with Jengar was stronger than what I got from using a sword. Although it was also quite harder to use it with Jengar compared to using it with a sword. But the results were more explosive." That had left Northern thinking about the true nature of this said sword art. Could it be an art subjected to formlessness, or was it formless because his formless attribute had an effect on it since the moment he gained it? Although he didn't quite know what it was, but he sensed it was the latter. He had long gained formless attribute before coming in contact with the vestige of the Chaos Prince. Plus, it was even awarded to him by Ul when she still had access to his soul. Northern breathed steadily. This fight was to test truly what it was of the two. Whether the ability is truly formless or just purely affected by formless. There was an astonishing effect that formless gave his heritage that made him so confused about the true nature of the heritage itself. "I guess it's called formless for a reason." Northern fixed his eyes on the creature as it got closer. It paused for barely a moment and with a deafening battle cry, lunged itself forward with the force and speed of a battering ram. Northern stood unfazed, both hands arched, one upward, one downward, almost marking two circumferential arcs of a circle. Black flames dancing from both his fists. And as the monster entered his zone, Northern took his time, slightly opening his mouth to let out a steamy breath as he pushed a leg forward, wedging a punch into the monster's stomach. Chaos Art, Subform, Falling Star. As the punch connected with the monster's midsection, a pulverizing burst of flames suddenly exploded. Northern was already hurling his other fist, before the monster could even react to this one. As the first connected, the second also did, forming a terrifying combo attack. Second subform, Comet Fury. Immediately the second one connected. A series of swift, blurring punches followed. Northern began to mercilessly batter the monster, each of his fists exploding a torrent of flames that licked off the air and drowned the light around them. Meanwhile, the minions had managed to also climb the shore, although their number had been drastically reduced by the horror below the river. Immediately Northern saw them crawling out with chaos eyes. Two of his clones shot out of him and darted in that direction. Not for a moment did he stop his merciless battering. Without a space and breath, Northern pulled one arm backward, flames dancing proudly on his fist. Third subform, Silent Requiem. His fist was almost unseen and absolutely silent. It was like a little trace of white light, moving quickly in a pitch darkness, only to be noticed after leaving the darkness and connecting into a much larger force, illuminating it with the unseemly flames it harbored within. Only in this case, flames dark and vicious like embers of the night itself. As Northern's fist punched into the monster's midsection, it folded like a piece of paper, eyes bulging. Use first form ultimate, eternal chaos. Northern's eyes widened a little bit as it all connected. The reason why it was called a subform and why he had never actually used the main form clicked. This was all a combo attack that needed to be successfully executed undisturbed for the main attack to be evoked. Happy at his progress, a little smile framed Northern's lips as he restructured his hand again. Northern's expression turned frightfully focused as he gathered an insane amount of void essence in his arms, causing the black flames to dance even wilder. With a deep breath he unleashed first form ultimate, eternal chaos. As he uttered these words, the air around him seemed to distort. The black flames that had been dancing on his fists now engulfed his entire body, creating an aura of pure destruction. Northern's body moved with a dark and ominous grace, his movements fluid and precise. He launched himself at the already battered monster, his fist connecting with its chest. The moment of impact seemed to stretch into eternity. For a split second, everything went silent. Then chaos erupted. A massive explosion of dark flames burst forth from the point of contact, engulfing both Northern and the monster. The shock wave rippled outwards, causing the very air to shudder. When the dust settled, Northern stood tall, his breathing heavy but controlled. The monster, what was left of it, was a skeleton that slowly crumbled to dust, for soul cores falling to the ground. Congratulations, you have killed an apex hellion. You have gained 16 talent fragments. It was apex? Wow! And just like that, unbelievably, Northern killed an apex hellion. I really have gotten stronger, I guess. A wide smile appeared on his face as he looked at his hands. He really wished he had discovered this while using a sword or Jengar at least. But still, this was not bad progress. Just in time as he finished the leader, he also saw other panels. You have gained. You have gained. Northern turned to Mr. Fluffy, beating his chest with a proud grin plastered to his face. See, I have gotten quite dependable, haven't I? The beast growled, happily tapping its forelimb on the ground joyously. Chapter 369. The Disaster That Was Wrought in Sloria, Part 1. Jessie yawned a little bit, stretched and walked out of the tent. Just as she did, Ellis jammed her, hurriedly stopping in front of her. She frowned a little bit, observing his hasty demeanor before asking, "Young boy, what is wrong?" North. He left away. The lady's frown got darker. She grabbed his black rough shirt and easily pulled him to herself, slightly lifting his legs off the ground. Huh? What did you say? Northern. He left on his own to an enemy stronghold. To save a friend. Jessie narrowed her eyes and released his shirt. He almost stumbled as his feet touched the ground. She squeezed her fists together, relieving the tension on her joints with a wild grin marring her face. Take me to this enemy stronghold. I'm not gonna let him have all the fun. Annette suddenly walked up to her, smiling. What a coincidence. I happen to be going there myself. Jessie's facial expression suddenly contorted with heavy scrutiny of the lady standing opposite her. Annette seemed to have even grown more scars, her muscles coiled tautly, like their cords of fibers had been drawn tighter by the progress of her soul. Plus she was wearing an armless top, displaying the scars on both her arms like some trophy. Her jacket was slumped over her shoulder. Her hair seemed longer too, and this time braided, so she looked less like a fiery drunkard. Behind her was a lady that seemed like the most beautiful thing that had been cut out of an ebony rock, carved by divine hands. The shape of her body made spit dry in the throats of men, despite being in a desolate land like this one. Annette smiled once more and asked when Jessie was not saying anything. Would you like to go with us? The lady looked at Annette and the lady behind her. We are also friends of Northern, she added. Jessie finally nodded. Fine, take me there. Annette smiled and nodded. All of them headed towards the same direction and walked out of the camp. Meanwhile, Northern stood at the gate of Sloria stronghold. The last time he was here he had come in through the back tunnel, in order to avoid the eyes of the drifters, safely do what they came for and pull out. But today he was here to wreak nothing but havoc on this place. As his eyes gleamed with a mad light, Mr. Fluffy also seemed to resonate the feeling, causing the air to blow forward with his low, rumbling growl. Northern squinted his eyes, tentatively looking at the wooden gate. Compared to the one at the shelter, this one was like a mammoth. Rods of dried, bamboo-like woods hammered together to create a formidable and unbreakable wall of some sort. There were towers to the left edge and right edge of the gate. And by now, drifters from that tower should be aiming at Northern with whatever talent abilities they have in order to confirm his identity before letting him in. But the place looked deserted. The gate, although was closed. Northern patted Mr. Fluffy a little bit. The white beast slowly strode forward, its furs dancing proudly in the gentle sandy wind. Northern slid down from him and walked to the gate. He knocked on it and waited for a few seconds. There was no response. Then he knocked again, this time more aggressively. There was still no response. He breathed in, calmly placing his 5 fingers on the wood at the same time closing his eyes. He breathed out, and quickly folded his hand to a fist, lunging it forward without even the slightest waste of movement. His hand punched a hole through the thick bamboo. Afterwards, everything seemed to calm down slowly. It looked like the best his fist had done was to delve a hole into the wooden gate. But Northern knew what he was aiming for. Using Chaos Eyes, he had detected the weakest point of the gate ligature structures and attacked that particular area. He slowly stepped back, and as he did, the gate began to tremble. Northern looked up and watched as cracks ran from one bamboo to the next. Everything began to break apart heavily, like something was splitting them apart from inside out. Eventually, the entire wall structure, not just of the main gate but the entire wall, crumbled before Northern. Even the towers crashed to the ground and broke apart. However, they were not really affected by the breaking apart of the bamboo sticks. They, after all, were made of different material. Northern's eyes widened for a second as he saw the scene before him. Then they slowly narrowed. Just like I suspected. Indeed, something was heavily wrong. The entire stronghold looked deserted, but at least the makeshift houses seemed to be in a very okay condition. Although they were still nothing compared to the decrepit buildings that marked their backdrop. Northern slowly walked in between the makeshift houses, Mr. Fluffy slowly surveying the surrounding behind them. And they continued that path for a while and still met no one. At this point, Northern's anticipation was already peaking. He looked left and right in quick succession as they strode forward. Eventually, he decided to use Chaos Eyes and see forward. It was as if the distance was being sucked into his vision, like he suddenly zoomed in with his eyes. And there they were. An immense crowd of people stayed clustered together, and they were blocking Northern from seeing whatever it was they were looking at. But at least he had known the reason why they were not in their houses. Every single person was probably at that place, looking at something. Usually, Northern would be cautious of this situation. The crowd was enormous, and he had to consider that most of the people standing there were probably at least drifter ranks. But he was very well prepared since the moment he left the shelter. Although he didn't want to have to kill anyone. But at this point, if that was what it took to make them realize the drastic and unfair space that now separated him from them, then he'd kill without mercy. He climbed Mr. Fluffy and slowly strutted forward with the white beast. When Northern got to half the road, a frown suddenly appeared on his face. It was because of the presence he felt amongst the crowd. He could never mistake it. What are they doing here? He continued even more quickly upon realizing that Raven and her cohort were currently in the same place. What she had come to do was pretty obvious, but he was still being driven mad by curiosity as Mr. Fluffy dashed towards the crowd, which had now come into better view. Chapter 370. The Disaster That Was Wrought in Sloria, Part 2. Northern stopped abruptly a couple of meters away from the main crowd. The distance between him and them was parted by a broken bridge that arched over a sewage tunnel. He came down from Mr. Fluffy and patted the wolf. "You wait here. Let me see what's happening." The presence that he had initially sensed, he thought the person was fighting. It only made sense that they were. But now that he was closer, he couldn't hear any clashing of metal against metal. There were no signs of any hardened struggle within the crowd. Even if there truly was and he had missed something, then it was impossible for the crowd to be gathered like that around. Northern trekked forward, jumping on the handle of the broken bridge, and carefully treading its path to the other side. Eventually, he reached the crowd and carefully observed from behind. He wasn't that proud of his sense of sound, but he could hear enough from this distance. And what he heard made his brows crease. What the hell is this girl doing? There she was, in the center of the crowd, addressing the populace, spitting the same nonsense jargon that she has always talked about. Sloria Stronghold has the greatest number of drifters. You people are creative and have managed to build a home for yourselves in this desolation. While that was admirable and splendid indeed, isn't there a need for you to ask yourselves what the hell it is exactly that you people are doing? Mothers, fathers, siblings, they all wait for you, for your return or to make things worse. They have no idea the hell you have been thrown into. The former principal is probably feeding them lies of your well-being. While you are here fighting painstakingly for your lives being forced upon with a fate that you never asked for. When all you just wanted to do was go to the academy and become a useful drifter. Someone valuable enough to provide a future for their family. She glanced around as she continued. Those men, no matter how old they might have been at that point, are far stronger than the useless dregs that stand before me right now. Because at least they were trying to take a leap for the people they love, for themselves, for their future. Right now, however, they have become nothing but mentally lazy riffraff, oblivious to the true reality of their situation, blinded by what is only a semblance of comfort. Her voice grew with a powerful intensity. When they could take it upon themselves and stand. Fight. Pick yourselves up once more and fight for your family. Fight for your future. It is possible to leave this desolated continent. It is very possible. A voice rose out of the crowd. Mind, I remind you of the detrimental effect of raising the hopes of people. What you speak of is vague. Even if we do manage to defeat the rifts, defeat them as you propose, what about the Luengard Empire? We've been in business for 6 years now, and they have never allowed us into their walls. As far as the facts go, only they have the ships that can take us across the sea, whether by air or land. The person that spoke was a man of many hairs. He had brown, curly, tousled tresses. His frame was large and dark. Pitch-black markings, almost bearing a kindly resemblance to those on Helena's face, ran across his body in straight lines and forming patterns on his exposed body. He stepped forward as he continued, each step of his carefully guided, his entire demeanor radiating a pure and primal power. You approach us with vague plans, mere dreams of a child, blinded by the semblance of comfort? You know nothing. You are naive. And what if you manage to defeat the rift? What if you enter Luengard? What if you cross the river? What if you return to the Central Plains? And so what? Happy look at who's back home. You are wrong if you think they will receive you with wide arms. To think they'd be glad about your return is stupidity. Thick cords of veins appeared along his neck as he spoke even further, glaring at Raven. You are stupid, arrogant, and ignorant. The moment you return to that continent, everyone there will perceive you as a threat. From the day we arrived in this desolation, our fate was decided, Raven. We are the lot who does not deserve a place in what is good of this world. The least we can do is perpetrate a deserving destruction for what we have suffered. A wide, almost maniacal smirk marked the man's face as he ended his statement. Northern had his eyes fixed on both of them. It was like the air around them suddenly grew heavy with tension. I have given you the liberty to speak, and now, Raven, I have every right to kill you. But I plan to do that slowly. Northern glanced around. How odd. No signs of Terence or Helena? Raven glared at him and took a purposeful slow stride toward him, stopping in front of him. She craned her neck slightly to meet his predatory gaze. You probably gave me the liberty to speak and agreed to the bet because you were confident that there is nothing I can do to convince your populace that they need to fight. She suddenly smiled and began to step back. But you misunderstood me, Afghan. Your one single problem is that you always fail to acknowledge my strength. Allowing me to leave, allowing me to go to the sleeping mountains, allowing me audience with your people. That, Afghan, was a very stupid move. One you made because you think I don't pose any threat to your authority. She grinned. Watch me as I prove you wrong. Raven turned to the other crowd. For a split second, her gaze and Northern's met. And Northern could have sworn he saw a little smile on her face. One that made him begin to feel uncomfortable about being here. He raised a brow and looked at the man standing a couple of feet away from Raven. So, that is Afghan? The entire situation was a bit confusing, but he was getting a hang of what was currently happening. Oh, Raven. What in the crappy hell have you done this time? Chapter 371. The Disaster That Was Wrought in Sloria, Part 3. Northern was not sure what else they were doing. But they were not here at all, they were not laying hidden somewhere. The only person that was here was Raven. Which meant she had stubbornly insisted that they do not follow her even though she was walking straight into the enemy's camp. Northern could easily picture that about her. She probably had resolved herself to die if the need be. Of course, the Raven he knew was equally resolved not to die in a place like this. I wonder what it is exactly that drives her. How she is able to keep a different view from everybody and work towards the good of everyone. Even though it was clearly careless and full of flaws, amazed him. and at the same time only made his hatred for her grow even more. She does not know when to just stop. She had probably come here to recruit. By now, it was clear that Raven's plan was to fight all 4 cardinal rifts. If she'd be doing that, she'd need allies, strong ones. While the drifters in Lothellowen were strong, they were watered down compared to what Sloria Stronghold had to offer. Which was why she probably came here to meet Afcon. Despite the animosity between both of them, they must have made a bet. And Raven must have something that she knows Afcon would never see coming. And Northern felt he had an idea of what it was. Just as Northern thought about it, the young dark-haired lady summoned something into her hands. Northern sighed immediately. Of course. She raised up her hand. Clasped within her grip was a small bottle, like a potion bottle but with a black body and golden engravings. That is the teardrop? Quite uncomely for a flood. Raven spoke, raising her voice higher. This is the answer that you all have probably been looking for. A sure way to get in and out of Lewingard. At this point, mutters began to rise. Up until now, it had been decorum like a graveyard. No one as much made the sound of a sigh while she was talking. Except now. Which meant her tactics were beginning to work, and Northern was not the only one noticing it. The brown-haired man, Afcon, standing beside her, wore a small frown on his face immediately. Listen to me carefully as I tell you what Afcon would never say. She turned her gaze to him. And don't you dare try to stop me from saying this. They trust in your leadership, don't they? You respect them, don't you? Isn't that why you have given me a fair chance of speech? Because you are sure that your people have unwavering trust in your leadership, right? Then she turned to the crowd. Whereas you have been deceiving them, lying to them, killing them, using them. You knew about the existence of the teardrop, didn't you? Immediately she mentioned it, some certain people began to mutter amongst themselves. Finally, one of their voices went up. Don't tell us that nonsense. The tear is a legendary item that King Lothellowen and Sloria thought existed. They died trying to find it. Raven smiled at the buzz-cut boy that spoke and nodded her head. Indeed, fella, you are right. They died trying to find it. And left a journal, each to their kingdom. All clues were there. And no doubt the kings too must have thought that the surefire way to get out of this desolation was to go through Lewingard. But Lewingard would never open its door to anyone. Now, let me not even start talking about the underlying reasons that you people fail to think about as to why they keep their gates locked and turn a blind eye to the disaster going on in this place. Which Afcon knows about and refuses to tell any of you. Northern folded his arms and continued to observe from behind. More of his attention was on Afcon. The young man was beginning to get uncomfortable. But Raven had given him a crude hanger. If he tried to do anything right now, he would be turning the people against himself. But Northern also didn't think he was the type to reason that far with common sense in this situation. He was probably waiting to see if Raven's explanation was the truth. He would probably go for her neck the moment he hears a bit of truth from her mouth. Although Northern had come here to burn the place to the ground, he didn't mind hearing a thing or two from Raven's mouth, since she wouldn't usually just say it. She took a deep breath and looked around confidently as she continued. It doesn't matter if you refuse to believe me, but this is it. This is the item that the past kings found out about. The force of flooding from this item is enough to break the mighty walls of Lewingard, destroy their city, and is the perfect cover to steal as many ships as we need to. Afcon's posture seemed to straighten up slightly as she spoke. It was a slight change only someone like Northern, whose focus was more on Afcon than anyone, would notice. His expression from before slowly faded. Raven is wrong? He frowned slightly. Perhaps there was something Raven was not considering that he knew about. Which meant, this guy actually does know about it all. Afcon, by his posture and gesture, definitely knew more than anyone about this desolation and whatever role Lewingard was playing in it. And he was refusing to let up that information. I wish she'd just talk about the underlying reasons she had spoken about earlier. Because he had been specifically confused and consistently questioned why the hell Lewingard would not open their gate to help the people in need. For over 20 years. That was pure wickedness. There had to be a reason behind it. and Northern dully suspected that one way or the other, that reason would link back to Ruffsburg. He didn't know how, but that suspicion just hung heavy on his mind. Sometimes, he often even thought maybe all this desolation, everything happening to them right now was man-implemented. Enforced. Couldn't be right? They wouldn't be so crazy that they would jeopardize two countries, civilizations? Right? Northern honestly wanted to believe that they wouldn't be. Because for what purpose would it serve? Chapter 372. The Disaster That Was Wrought in Sloria, Part 4. Afghan chuckled, cutting Raven off mid-breath. She turned her head to him with a slight frown. He took his time chuckling before he faced her, with curled lips, eyes gleaming with benign wickedness. You see, girl, you are merely a child. A child will only think as a child. Growth and maturity is realizing that when fate chooses you, submission is not a choice. Don't make this about us, young daughter of the prestigious Kageyama clan. You just want to go home at all cost, don't you? You want to go back into daddy's bosom and protection. He laughed as he stated. So did the crowds. The way they carried Afghan's laughter was enough to prove the kind of unbreakable relationship between him and his stronghold. He didn't look like just a leader to these ones. Even when they spoke in defense of him. Even when doubts reflected in their eyes, it looked like they were seriously considering it and how to unattach their leader Afghan from the situation. That was how crazy devoted they were to him. At least that was what Northern could see. And it was quite disappointing how Raven was not seeing it also. Perhaps she thought she could break that. Raven sighed and slowly clenched her fist, looking at it. Her eyes were distant for a moment before she raised them to Afghan, all emotions disappearing from her face. Afghan, home? This is my home. I have come here to stay. Afghan's face contorted slowly into a puzzled expression. Everyone including Northern was just as puzzled as he was. What did she mean by that? As if resonating with Northern's thoughts, Afghan asked the exact question. What do you mean by that? Raven shrugged nonchalantly. Nothing extravagant, I am just saying, unlike what you think. I am not looking forward to going back to my clan. And make no mistake, if my father cared one bit about me, this entire continent would be covered in blood. So you should actually be thankful that he doesn't. Afghan narrowed his eyes at her. She spoke with a blank expression, but there was a flame of blatant and crude honesty burning softly in her eyes. Maybe that was what made Afghan so uncomfortable. Her words had never been heard of. He suddenly laughed out loud, then said to her, Are you insane? There's no need trying to act so tough before all these men. We understand you, spoilt brat. Raven allowed a small, mocking smile. Spoiled brat. I wish, Afghan, I wish. Now, Afghan was very wary of her. His eyes were rested upon her full visage, with a tensed frown on his face. The crowd too were silent. Northern sighed, his gaze fixated on Raven and Afghan. I guess this is all. I came here to do something, although there is a little bit of stress to my plan because of this pest of a girl. But I still have to save How. He thought. For a couple of seconds, he remained still, both in thoughts and motion. After removing his eyes from Raven and Afghan, he moved them to observe the crowd. Observation was the easiest thing he could do with chaos eyes. Sloria's stronghold held fewer drifters than usual. At least the looks of the atmosphere told that most of their men had been deployed elsewhere. And that somewhere else was probably Lothelowin, except there was somewhere else that Sloria was currently bullying. Meanwhile, Afghan looked at Raven, taking steps closer to her. I have given you all the chance that you bargained for. You wanted to talk to them, you were sure you can convince them to fight with you, to fight for a home which they are not sure is even waiting for them. You see how naive you are, little girl. You should have just stayed with me and let me teach you then. He looked at her from head to toe, licking his lips, a dangerous light blinking in the depth of his brown eyes. Well, I can still teach you a thing or two. Surrender yourself to me, Raven. She extended her hand and summoned two swords. Afghan frowned and raised a brow as her swords shimmered into existence with sparkling white lights. Is this really the path you will choose, Raven? Look at all the people here. Do you think you can go against all of us, alone? Raven skillfully twirled her sword, her eyes igniting with a dark and dangerous spark within their depth. "I am confident I can hold my own against all of you." Afghan cocked his head and grinned. "But whoever said I was alone?" Immediately, Afghan's grin began to fade away. He straightened his head and looked at her, a serious light deep in his eyes. Other people began to look amongst themselves and around. "Ah, this bitch." Of course, he was expecting her to do that. She wouldn't be Raven if she didn't do that. Northern didn't care. This just made it way easier for him. Without caring a bit for his surrounding, he gallantly marched forward. In the moment, everyone's gaze shifted to him. Everywhere suddenly seemed to waft with heavy, hot and searing pressure as he strutted forward without a side glance. They all stood cautiously, ready to lunge at him at any moment. But at the same time, they all froze, as if caught in the unmoving tendrils of time. Northern finally stopped in front of Raven and looked at her indifferently. Silence prevailed between the two for a couple of beats. Then he said, "With this we are even." Raven nodded. "It's good to see you." Northern looked away. "I thought you would have been killed." "I was." Northern glanced at her as he turned away from her to the rest. She added, "I am very stubborn even with death." The trace of a small cocky grin left her face. Northern gently scrutinized all of them. "So, you go with Afghan while I take care of the rest." Raven nodded and quietly said, "I'm sorry to bother you." Northern responded, "Don't kill him until I'm done. I've got someone I have to rescue." Both of them dashed in opposite directions, Raven appearing in front of Afghan, while Northern, well, Chaos Flame. Chapter 373. The Disaster That Was Wrought in Sloria, Part 5. The scenery darkened quickly. Lusterless black flames with a vicious and unforgiving nature ignited around Northern and surged forth like night wraiths, painting the environment with guttural screams and ambient marks of destruction. Northern did not mind the noise. They were music to his ears. He pitied them really, if at least they had decided to join Raven. Maybe, just maybe they could have been spared. Black flame is an easy way for him to kill people without feeling like he killed people. Having the vicious and unending flame burn them till they were nothing still felt better than directly stabbing them with his sword. Although that did not mean it had any less effect in promoting his proficiency with the void. Sadly, Northern did not seem to even be caring about that anymore. He nonchalantly walked amidst the flames like an emissary of its essence, deaf-eared to the screams and cries of agony as the flames danced around. He inspected all their faces as they burned, using chaos eyes to observe beyond the obvious. But none of them fit the image of the man that fought Fluffy and Night Terror. He, after all, had seen it in Night Terror's memory. That was the person that was in charge of subduing Lotheloan's stronghold. The same guy that burnt his mansion. Northern was dying to find him. Meanwhile, Raven and Afghan were locked in a blurring dance of metal against flesh. Raven's blades sang through the air, each strike laced with a frightening and crude passion for blood. Yet, Afghan remained unfazed, his bare hands effortlessly deflecting her attacks as if they were mere annoyances. He was also smiling at her, not even shifting a leg despite how she dove in and out of his space to exert more force and pressure. "You've improved, little bird," Afghan taunted, his smile never wavering. "But you're still flapping your wings in a storm you can't comprehend." Raven frowned as she landed back. "Don't you dare call me that." A corner of Afghan's lips curled. "What? You despise the days where you pretended to be my wife? I actually thought you enjoyed it. You were so good at it you had me convinced that you loved me." He raised a brow. "Are you sure you didn't?" Raven gritted her teeth, refusing to let his words affect her concentration. "Do you realize I am 17 and you are what again? 26. Afghan raised his brows shamelessly. "Age does not matter. You have a hole in between your legs and two balls pointing out of your chest. That is all that matters." "Bastard." She dashed forward and feinted left, then spun right, her sword arcing towards Afghan's exposed neck. But once again, his hand was there, catching the blade between his thumb and forefinger. Predictable, he sighed, disappointment lacing his voice. With a flick of his wrist, he sent Raven stumbling backward. She regained her footing quickly, her eyes narrowing as she reassessed her opponent. Afghan's casual demeanor belied his incredible strength and speed. She needed a new approach, and she had only one. One she despised using. Afghan meanwhile stepped forward, moving his hands in guiding gestures with his words. If you think you can defeat me, Raven, you are very wrong. No one in this desolation can defeat me, not even your auntie Helena can dare. Raven landed afar again and swirled both her swords and arcs, pushing her legs slightly forward and her upper body a little bit bent. She looked like she was about to leap very high, but instead she went very low. Her body became a blur of white as she flashed across the distance between them. Afghan in the heat of that moment frowned and threw one hand forward. This time he didn't just block with his hand. A black matter, kite-shaped, occupied the space in front of him, where Raven had directly struck. She grinned mockingly. Finally getting wary of me? Dirty king. He stared at her, his eyes gleaming with barely noticeable specters of angst. There it is, Raven said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. The realization that you're not invincible. Afghan's smile returned, but this time it held an edge of respect. Perhaps I underestimated you, but you are wrong, little bird. You cannot even scratch me. Making me use this, my ability, is the best you can do. Don't expect more of yourself. Let's see how well you fly when the wind picks up. With that, Afghan's movements shifted. Where before he had been content to defend, now he launched into a series of lightning-fast strikes. His hands moved with inhuman speed, each blow carrying enough force to shatter bone. Raven found herself on the defensive, her sword a silver blur as she desperately parried Afghan's attacks. She could feel the air displacement from his near misses, each one a reminder of how close she was to defeat. The two continued for a couple of minutes, their battle becoming more intense and difficult to follow. Afghan's hands were fast. They seemed like they were more than just two, and Raven's hands were barely struggling to keep up, barely deflecting with strikes. Not to say that her fatigue was beginning to build up. She had come here straight after fighting a single-digit knight of Luengard Empire. Not to say there were planetary distances between the stamina of an ascendant and a savant. The latter trying to contend with the former was bound to even wear the latter out quickly than usual. Raven was exerting herself more than usual, and she did not know it, and her fatigue build-up was crazily rising. She found herself pushed to her limits. Afghan's relentless assault had her on the back foot, each block sending shockwaves through her arms. Tired already? Afghan taunted, his fist grazing Raven's cheek as she narrowly dodged. Raven didn't waste breath on a reply. She knew Afghan was trying to bait her into a mistake. Instead, she focused on her breathing, on the flow of essence through her body. She looked for one chance to turn the tide. She was waiting for him to just make one single mistake. As Afghan's next strike came in, Raven didn't block. Instead, she let the blow graze her shoulder, using the momentum to spin inside Afghan's guard. Her sword flashed up, aiming for his heart. For a split second, surprise registered on Afghan's face. Then, impossibly fast, his hand clamped down on Raven's wrist, stopping the blade mere inches from his chest. Clever, he admitted, genuine admiration in his voice, but not clever enough. With a twist, he wrenched the sword from Raven's grasp, sending it clattering to the ground. His other hand shot out, slapping off the other sword as it pierced towards him and gripping her throat, lifting her off her feet. Raven struggled, her feet kicking uselessly in the air as she clawed at Afghan's iron grip. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision as her lungs screamed for air. You fought well, little bird, Afghan said almost sadly. But this is where your flight ends. Just as Raven's consciousness began to fade, a wave of intense heat washed over them both. Afghan's head snapped around, his eyes widening at the sight before him. Northern stood at the edge of the battlefield, the black flames swirling around him like a living cloak. In one hand, He held the charred remains of someone that had dared to fight him. His eyes, blazing with the power of chaos, locked onto Afghan. Let her go. Each word was punctuated by a surge in the black flames. Chapter 374. The Disaster That Was Wrought in Sloria, Part 5. Afghan's grip on Raven loosened, allowing her to gulp in precious air. He turned to face Northern fully, his earlier confidence replaced by wary respect as he looked around his surroundings. His eyes came back to rest on Northern before turning to Raven. Is he your boyfriend? I'm offended, little bird. Northern's face contorted with disgust as he heard his words. That girl owes me many favors, no doubt. But you, in particular, I am interested in. Afghan finally abandoned Raven and fully turned to Northern. Who are you and what are you looking for? Northern whistled loudly, causing Afghan to look around warily once again. A couple of seconds afterwards, a large beast ran towards them and finally stopped behind Northern. It was so fearsome that Afghan's gaze scrutinized it for more than just a minute, not to talk of the light of caution hidden in the depth of his eyes. You see, I am looking for a man, Northern started. He's tall, blonde hair, blue eyes. Afghan narrowed his eyes. Zephyr. I guess you do know him. He has my friend, and I'm just here to take him back. Afghan giggled for a bit. Well, you are quite the dumb one. You didn't need to come all the way here to meet Zephyr. He's still camped at Lothellowan Castle. He's not to come back until he has the entire stronghold by his side. Northern raised a brow. Why the hell didn't I consider that? His decision had been on the fly, he knew, but to what did it matter? There was no need to let the enemy know that. Stupid? No, I was not. I wanted to burn this entire place to the ground either way. As you can see, none of your subjects remain. Afghan looked at the leftovers of the black flames dancing around like pieces of torn clothes here and there. Then he stared into Northern's face. His expression was a bit stony and strong this time around. He wanted to speak but hesitated, still staring at Northern. He smacked his lips mildly and smiled. More than half of my army is on Lothellowan. Word of the Empire's Knight's demise has gotten to the Empire by now, and a special force is being put together to eradicate all of Lothellowan. There is nothing waiting for you guys today but destruction. He turned his head to Raven. Little bird, come over to the right side. When all of this is done, Lewingard will open its doors to us. Raven staggeredly stood up, slightly touching her neck. Is that why you sold out your kinsmen? The people that trusted you with their entire self? Her voice started off a little hoarse but regained its strength as she continued. Because Lewingard was going to open their doors to you when all of this is over? Did they know that you have bargained with their lives? Afghan shrugged. They were going to die anyway. This desolation offered nothing but destruction. It was only a matter of time before that happened. And look, you have no right to lecture me. Your friend over here killed them all. Veins grew along his neck as he shouted. For once since they started, Afghan was beginning to seem worked up. Raven looked at Northern. There was a little spark of distaste he could see in her eyes, but she redirected it to Afghan. Is she judging me? He killed a lot of people and gained so much from it, and right now he wasn't even feeling bad about it. But he had to know the reason why that slight and almost unnoticed look in Raven's eyes unsettled him greatly. His brows contorted into a frown. I'm done with this. He raised his head slightly as he came to his decision. You know what? His eyes sat on Raven for a bit, then moved to Afghan. I've had my answer. I know where your buddy is. I don't care what happens from here on out. Afghan smiled delightfully. What a posh young man you are. Carry on. Northern glared at Raven and turned away from them, climbed Mr. Fluffy, and hurtled away on the beast, not caring if Raven died in Afghan's arms. After traces of Northern and his wolf had long been gone, Afghan turned to Raven with a sweet smile designing the corners of his lips. My little bird. Where did we pick up? Raven slowly stood upright and dismissed her swords. She looked into Afghan's face and said, hers betraying no emotion. Have you ever wondered, Afghan, what my talent abilities are? Afghan scoffed. Isn't it obvious, sword lady? Your fast movement, swift and precise accuracy with the sword. That's no ordinary. I figured it out long ago. There's no way you would have beat me by pure skills. Your talent ability is something that adds to your sword. Raven curved her brows upwards. You have it wrong, Afghan. I did beat you without any talent abilities. But you are right about one thing. My speed and swiftness with the sword is not ordinary. I trained and died multiple times to be able to attain it. She paused and looked at him squarely. Afghan, I meant it when I said you can't kill me. Afghan, stoic in his composure, tilted his head slightly. Oh, my little bird. Delusional till the very end. He spread both his arms and grinned. The markings on his body began to peel off, like they were plasters being torn out of flesh only to manifest into reality. The black markings waved around him like tentacles, eager to shoot forth on his orders. On his face was a smug grin, as he presented the core of his talent to Raven with a dangerous and twisted ferocity in his eyes. Raven, however, did not seem fazed. She brushed her hand through her hair and lowered her head. One could tell by her demeanor that she really hated the path she was about to take. Then she muttered, "Light manipulation, Sela's halo." Immediately, a ring of light appeared on her head. Following that, all the scratches on her body began to heal. Her eyes changed from crimson into bright white light. Her hair turned completely white, and her body shimmered with a golden aura. Afghan was completely stunned by this presence. His expression became dour. Nothing was funny anymore. Chapter 375. A Monster, Part 1. Raven's transformation left Afghan momentarily stunned. The golden aura surrounding her body pulsed with power, her white hair floating as if suspended in water. The ring of light hovering above her head cast an otherworldly glow across the desolate landscape. Afghan's earlier smugness evaporated, replaced by a grim determination. He knew the tides of this fight were about to shift. So, the little bird had talons after all, he growled, his black markings writhing around him like agitated serpents. Let's see if they're sharp enough. Without warning, Afghan's markings shot towards Raven, morphing into razor-sharp spears. Raven's form blurred as she dodged with inhuman speed, leaving afterimages in her wake. The spears embedded themselves in the ground where she had stood just moments before. Raven reappeared behind Afghan, her sword materializing in her hand. She struck with lightning precision, aiming for his neck. Afghan's markings coalesced into a shield, barely deflecting the blow. The force of the impact sent shockwaves through the air, kicking up dust and debris. Afghan spun, lashing out with a whip-like tendril. Raven ducked under it, feeling the wind of its passage ruffle her hair. She countered with a series of rapid slashes, her blade leaving trails of golden light in its wake. Afghan was forced on the defensive, his markings forming a constantly shifting barrier to parry Raven's relentless assault. Each clash of sword against living ink sent sparks flying, the air crackling with energy. "You've been holding back all this time?" Afghan snarled, frustration evident in his voice. Playing the helpless little bird while hiding such power. Raven's expression remained impassive, her glowing white eyes fixed on her opponent. "I told you, Afghan, you can't kill me. I've died too many times to fear death anymore." Her words only seemed to enrage Afghan further. His markings erupted outward in a frenzy, forming a forest of writhing tentacles that threatened to engulf Raven. She danced between them, her movements fluid and graceful, her sword flashing in deadly white arcs. Wherever Raven's blade touched Afghan's markings, they sizzled and recoiled as if burned by holy fire. Afghan grimaced, feeling each cut as if it were inflicted on his own flesh. "What are you?" he demanded, genuine fear creeping into his voice for the first time. Raven paused, her sword held at the ready. "I am what I've always been, Afghan. A survivor. Someone who's seen too much death and suffering to stand idly by while people like you destroy everything and everyone in your path." She lunged forward, her speed almost too fast for the eye to follow. Afghan barely managed to dodge, feeling the heat of her blade as it grazed his cheek. A thin line of blood appeared, and he stared at Raven in disbelief. You actually hurt me?" he muttered, touching the cut with trembling fingers. Raven didn't relent, pressing her advantage. Her sword became a blur of motion, forcing Afghan to concentrate all his markings into a dense shield. Each impact sent tremors through his body, the strength behind Raven's strikes far beyond what her slender frame suggested. Afghan channeled his markings into the ground, causing them to erupt in a circle around Raven. She leaped high into the air, somersaulting over the black spikes that threatened to impale her. As she descended, her sword trailing golden light, Afghan saw an opening. He focused his markings into a single massive spear, aiming for Raven's unprotected back. Time seemed to slow as the spear hurtled towards her, promising a fatal blow. But Raven's words echoed in Afghan's mind. "You can't kill me." At the last possible moment, Raven twisted in midair, her sword cleaving through Afghan's spear as if it were made of smoke. She landed gracefully, her white eyes locked onto Afghan's stunned face. "How?" Afghan whispered, his confidence thoroughly shattered. "How can you predict my every move?" Raven stood straight, looking at Afghan with an indifferent expression. "Reading you amongst many others is a very easy thing for me to do. I can't just read you, Afghan. I can read anyone I set my mind to." Her eyes grew distant and chagrined for a while. "Well, except one person. But once I fought you before, I figured I could bait you easily if I wanted to. This whole thing, you going after Lothelowin, the Empire finally making their move, you think you were in control all this while." Afghan's eyes were fixed on her for a couple of seconds. He scrunched them and said, "What do you mean?" "What I meant, Afghan, is that you have been playing right into my hand from the moment I left the stronghold and you didn't even realize it." He chuckled. "Yeah, that's easy for you to say, when destruction is being heralded your way by my stronghold. This is me playing your move by destroying something I know you built." Raven smiled at him. This was the only way I could go about it. At that point, Afghan became wary in his demeanor and words. "You're bluffing. What possible good could this do to you?" Raven exhaled, then raised her hands. She folded her thumb. "1. I needed a way to cause a civil war. Indeed, I brought everyone together, but it was only to make us stronger. Not everyone has the capability of growth, and some certain situations have to be fulfilled for one's innate ability to blossom. We cooperated when we needed to, and I am glad it worked, but there was only so far that would take us." She sighed. "With some certain traitors in our midst, there's only so much we can do." Afghan looked at her with a slight frown. "And by traitor I am not talking about Braham. He's not even worthy enough to deserve my attention. I just needed to let Braham be Braham for this to happen. I am glad that he didn't disappoint me. Oh well, nobody ever does. Except that guy." "What are you even talking about? You are spitting nonsense. I let Braham betray us, because I knew you have been looking for a way to overtake Lothelowin. When that time came, I knew there was going to be civil war because Sage Gilbert would never let you, and then I separated 3 other trusted allies of mine to pick a different side from either of you two. This will cause a major division in the forces of Lothelowin. You would only be able to have Brahams and some other stupidly weak drifters amongst us." Afghan shook his head in disgust. "So you played chessboard with your own teammates to what end? Afghan, aren't you way worse? You killed 1 out of every student Ruffsburg sent here, to prove what point to the man, that he can never throw you away. And guess what his response was to that?" Afghan narrowed his eyes. "Ruffsburg didn't send a link this time around. He sent you all here to die. Simply to die." Raven smiled. "Is that what you think?" Her words immediately set him off such that he grimaced darkly, exuding an aura of malevolence. "What do you mean?" Raven looked at him and spoke confidently. "Ruffsburg sent a link this time around. He sent someone you wouldn't be able to kill, let alone know was a link." Afghan backed away in disbelief, his face contorting. "That's impossible. There's no one." He suddenly paused and narrowed his eyes at Raven. "Gilbert and his crews. That's why you needed us to break away from them. Because you couldn't trust them. Raven nodded and smiled. To move to the next phase of my plan, which is the most important before leaving this desolation, I needed to cut away those I can't trust. Afghan's face became entranced, but horribly. And you have been planning this since you left my stronghold. His voice was laced with a sublime fear. You monster manipulator. I am not a manipulator, Afghan. I just want to help everyone go back home. Chapter 376. A Monster, Part 2. You wanted to help them go home? This was all self-service, and you knew it. Self-service how? Raven paused, looking at him before she continued. Self-service or not, I am the only person in this desolation doing what is right while you all are frolicking away with a fate that was handed to you by a man that should be rotting in hell. Afghan frowned slightly. You think I don't hate Ruffsburg? He used me and abandoned me. He promised me I was going to be a legend. But you, little bird, have no idea at all what it is you are getting into. Raven shrugged, shaking her head slightly as she said, Have no idea what I am getting into? The fact that Lewingard Empire is allowing this disaster to happen? Or that the appearance of the 4 cardinal rifts was no coincidence? She paused and glared. Her throat seemed to go dry as the next couple of words layered on the edge of her tongue, hesitant to jump out. With enough temperament she swallowed them back in, at least for now. But Afghan was already long suspended in an air of stunning shock. His expression was barren for a couple of heartbeats. But he regained himself with a frown and refocused his eyes at Raven with determination. You have no idea what you are talking about. It's nonsense, and as much as I value you, little bird, I think it's high time I show you the difference between the two of us. He paused and somewhat pompously raised his chin. I can't continue to let you live, Raven. A vicious and menacing grin laced Raven's face. I told you already before, Afghan, and I'll say it again. You can't kill me. Afghan smiled equally, his a bit gentlemanly but fearsomely worrying. Let's see about that. He spread his arms into the air. The writhing inky tendrils that surrounded him began to plunge into his body, merging back with his skin. He tore off his shirt with ease and used it as a bind to pack his hair into a ponytail, not caring however rugged and unsightly he looked. Now, however, his broad, chiseled chest, sculpted as if by a divine hand, was fully exposed. Blending seamlessly with the night, he projected the formidable visage of a tyrant, a presence so powerful it seemed to rival the very darkness itself. Raven, who stood on the far contrast side of this fact, did not waver the look of menace on her face. By the way, innocent, seemingly unharmful menace. The air became heavy in that instant second. It was quite evident that something huge was about to drop. Even the slight trembles in the earth made little stones shiver in fear. Let me give you a lecture today, Raven. There's something to the soul ranking that you never considered, nobody ever did. But it has always been known by those privileged to cross the transient rank. He slowly raised his right hand, looking at it with a small sadness reflecting in his eyes. There are some major ranks and there are minor ranks. As a walker, you are half-baked. When you become a drifter, however, you get to taste what true power feels like. Being a nomad. Ah, tisk. He shook his head and smacked his teeth. It's just there. The soul still feels the same as it did as a drifter. But the moment you reach the vagrant rank, you get a taste of what you felt as a drifter. But this time twice more. It feels raw. You feel a much greater connection to your soul than you have ever. He went silent, tracing the markings on his dry olive skin with eyes that had now gone from reflecting sadness to expressing maniacal awe. Then you become a savant. There's a much closer connection. But you can't really compare it to what you felt as a master. However, it's impossible to understand now that you are a savant. The moment you become a sage, however. He raised his face and closed his eyes, breathing in the crispy, seemingly burnt air of the night. Then he looked at Raven. At that point, little bird, that is the true point you begin to understand the meaning of what force is, what a soul force is, and I don't even expect you to understand or relate. He exhaled and slowly straightened his expression, sternly looking at Raven. Raven, and all these visceral descriptions I give you have nothing to what you feel when your soul evolves to the ephemeral rank and you become an ascendant. His voice grew loud and powerful. And I will show you, Raven, what it means to be an ascendant. As he growled heavily, his surrounding vibrated with an evident tremor that broke apart the ground. The air trembled even. And the next moment, before Raven's mind could register anything that was going on, Afghan rose from her shadows. He held his tendrils like a small knife in his hands, and drove it right towards her belly. By bare warrior reflex alone, Raven twisted herself out of the way, using a huge burst of light at her feet to propel herself away from him. But it was useless. She saw the man dissolve into the shadow, and drift towards her with a snakish pattern, super fast as at that. Before she could land from projecting herself, he was right beneath her again, rising from the shadow like a vicious snake. Yet again his attack came at her. Raven frowned and threw her hands forward, just in time to materialize a glowing shield that orbited her. The moment Afghan's attacks collided with the golden shield, he was sent careening away. Before seeing where he landed, he was already gone, merged into the shadows. It was at this point it probably registered to Raven that this dude, he was going to be a very tough opponent. She narrowed her eyes, inspecting everything around her. Within 10 feet of her, it was easy to see through all, because the light was bright enough to cast its brilliance and make the darkness creep away. But the time of the day she had chosen to fight this battle was at her disadvantage. She had arrived in the evening and now, it had proceeded into night. To toughen up her situation, the deeper into the night this went, the less advantageous it is for her. Because her vision was terribly limited in the night. Afghan would have leverage over her, the moment he discovers that her sight is limited. It was a battle where they constantly have to fight through. And he wasn't dumb, it was only a matter of time. And Raven needed to defeat Afghan within that matter of time. This was the only way she could narrowly sneak herself out of this situation. Whatever way this defeat had to be, or she could run away. But her eyes didn't look like those of someone willing to let up. She had fought so much to this point. She wasn't going to give it up now because she was at great disadvantage. When has the odds ever been in hers or Northern's favor? Damn it! I hate that I let him go. In this one deciding moment when it might be her last, Raven found herself stranded with the thoughts of only one person. Chapter 377. The Deciding Night, Part 1. The night was softly dark, sinking deep enough to gradually drown every trace of brilliant light into the forgotten folds of the clouds. Beneath the ground lay a sentimental reflection of this darkness. Amidst this faintly lit night, 3 figures walked, leaving behind a trail of significant destruction. Bodies were crudely beaten and battered, left to gape for whatever was left for them of the air to breathe. The 3 figures walked forward, nonchalant of the destruction behind them, although one particularly did seem a bit flat and unbefitting of this league. He trembled slightly as he walked and could barely keep up as the other 2 figures before him gallantly parted their way through the decrepit streets of a once familiar kingdom. After a couple of steps, cutting through 1 or 2 corners and the muscled lady easily delivering bone-breaking blows to those that obstructed their path before they could even register it, they finally got to their destination. The 3 of them stopped in front of a towering barricade, made of metal. Despite its de-aged state, the gate to the castle still stood as a colossal and intimidating sentinel of defense, dwarfing the 2 soldiers that stood in front of it. The lady, one of the ladies, with wildness written for her appearance, stepped forward. She paused, glancing around the environment with sentimentality hidden deep in her vermilion eyes. She wouldn't say it, anyone wouldn't, but this place sure did bring back memories. It would be unfair to classify them as good memories, given the fact that many have been thrown into a monster-infested desolation and made to desperately fight for their lives. But it was also the most they could make of good times. She, herself, would have said fate was at least a little bit fair to them for what those times provided. The peace, the bonds. But at this point, damn fate. Annette better than anyone knew fate had no hand in this. That is why it hurt her more than anyone. The least she wanted everyone to do was stand together. And the more she thought about it, the more pissed off she got about it. She had wanted to rip Graham apart for a long time, but Raven and Gilbert had protected him too much. Of course, she knew how much of an asset he was. But she also knew that men that think only of themselves, like Graham does, only end up being disgusting rats. She breathed in a great deal of air, and slowly breathed out. The desolate state of the outskirts pushed her to the edge of her anger, but she needed to keep her cool. She was wise enough to lecture herself that much. She closed her eyes to do her breathing exercise and looked at the guys in front of her. Her eyes were strong. She didn't need an extra effort to make them almost want to pee their pants. I will say this only once. We were comrades at a time. I have no bone to pick with you, but I don't have to kill you. You have another chance to choose your side. Many don't often get a chance like this. Her eyes narrowed seriously at them. Do you really think what Graham is doing is right? He betrayed us, all of us. What makes you think such a man values your loyalty? The guards stood in front of her, despite the fear that made them want to fold. They met her eyes with unstable but commendable determination in their eyes. One of them finally spoke. Since the day we became his party members, we swore loyalty against all odds, and we believe he works in the best interest of the party. He calls us family. If you think young Master Graham betrayed you all, then we betrayed you all. Immediately he stopped talking. Not a second late. His head was aggressively squashed by the air itself, leaving the sight of a grotesque horror to behold. Ellis almost vomited and quickly turned away as the two bodies fell lifelessly to the ground. Annette took a glance at the lady beside her, confirming with her expression if she had any problem about it. Immediately she got her answer and proceeded to the front. She stopped in front of the gate and looked up, then sucked her teeth. Dang. I've always loved this gate, she muttered to herself. Then stepped back a couple of steps, clenched her fist so tightly and pulled it back, feeling raw power course through every fiber of her muscle. Veins ran across her forearm as she strengthened them incredibly. And then she lunged forward and blew her devastating blow. One that resounded through the night and made the earth tremble. Following that, however, was a decorum so perfect that anyone would have been jilted into thinking nothing worked. The next second, however, the gate began to creak. What started as creaking began to shake heavily. Suddenly, Jessie grabbed Ellis by the collar and flew back. Just as she did, the gate shattered into smithereens of metal shards, flying everywhere and destroying what was left of the structures in the outskirts. As if that was not enough of a destruction, the walls slowly began to crumble, proof of how long both sentinels have resiliently held each other through the tough decades. Annette stood dauntless despite the gate's last tantrum before its demise, narrowly closed her eyes and punched away the shards that came her way. Then she had to close her eyes and look the other way when the wall collapsed, covering everything with its dust and rocks. It was getting deeper into the night already. The dust smoke only made it tougher. She didn't take longer before she opened her eyes and managed to see through, however. When she did, she heaved a big sigh. Oh damn, I didn't think Northern would be here. They're waiting for us. In front of her was a troop of no less than 300 men. All armed with different kinds of armors and weapons, but commonly armed with one thing. A trained, disciplined and determined look on their faces. Whatever Annette and Jessie had been facing outside there were nothing compared to these trained bunch of Sloria. Suspended up the walls of the castle was an open balcony, and on it 4 individuals stood. One leaned on the terrace of the balcony, his beautiful blue eyes gracefully falling on Annette. Instructor Annette, long time no see. Welcome. Have you come to finish this once and for all? Annette looked up and smiled, but her smile slowly faded as she made sight of the green-haired boy. She gritted her teeth and glared ferociously. Oh, that son of a maggot! Chapter 378. The Deciding Night, Part 2. Meeting an Old Friend, Part 1. In the depths of the river that parted Lothelloan forestry and the desert plains of Sloria, an aquatic horror lay passive in the depths of the water. Despite the air of devastation that was being carried around on both regions, the surface of the river was perfect and still, mirroring the two crescent moons that backed each other in the cold bosom of the sky. Crawling on top of the river bank was a slightly big worm, almost the size of a snake. It seemed to have just finished devouring a considerable chunk of the dead monsters that lay afar the river. It crawled on the dry sand slowly and soon dove into the water. Towards the left side of the riverbank where the worm had entered stood a small boy with black hair. He was bending down and keenly observed the worm till it entered into the river. Then he looked at the river itself with a determined look in his eyes. He touched the ground and could feel a slight vibration. This prompted him to quickly stand up. He threw one more glance into the river and looked back at the direction the vibration was coming from. Someone was coming towards him. A four-legged beast with steps powerful enough to make the earth tremble. He narrowed his eyes, flashing a small smile. "Let's hope this is enough to buy me time." Then slowly he faded into the air. A couple of minutes later, Mr. Fluffy galloped towards the river with powerful strides and steady speed. Northern was on him, eyes sternly narrowed. He looked like he was super focused on what was in front of him, but really he was deep in thought. He couldn't help but think of Raven's eyes. He was slowly accepting what he is, who he is. He didn't want to judge anyone anymore, didn't want to be a hypocrite, and most importantly was not going to feel sorry for living the way he wanted to and doing what he wanted to do. If it included bringing vengeance on that damn stronghold for daring to burn his mansion and kill Fluffy. In fact, maybe I should turn back around and show Afcon himself what happens when he crosses me. He frowned darkly and leaned lower to Fluffy, leading the beast to add a little more speed to its stride. But suddenly Northern's sense picked something up, causing him to stop abruptly. He couldn't make sense of it exactly, but something was wrong. He was barely 100 meters away from the river, the surface was calm, the air was dark and cool, cold in fact. He turned his head, slowly observing his surroundings before turning back to his front. Something is definitely wrong. I can feel it. He narrowed his eyes. Chaos Eyes could not pick anything. Maybe this is the moment to evolve Soul Eyes. I don't want to risk going forward without knowing what this unclear feeling is. Northern exhaled and looked down, summoning his panel. Name, Northern Longguard. True name, nameless, superscript 3. Attributes, formless, child of void, limitless void, vestige of chaos and void. Chaos Eyes, chaos thread, flames of chaos. Soul rank, nomad. Void summons, 6/100. Talent fragments, 1299/3000. Copied talents, 1/3. Own talents, 3. Attribute abilities, active/passive. August 11th. Owned items, Mortal Blade, Eternal Twilight, Death Glare, and 9 others. Let's see how much it costs to evolve a talent. Own talent 3. Talent, Advanced Cloning. Class, Talent, True. Name, me, myself, and I. Description, I am the only one, it is me, myself, and I. All others strengthen me. Talent ability, self-clone, other clone. Attributes, all the same. You can now view the information of attributes from copied talents. Talent progression, 0/600. Talent Soul Eyes. Class, C. Talent, True. Name, The Blind Song. Description, a melody in the distant horizons beckons to lead the unsightly into a world beyond. Talent ability, C. Attributes, sense. Talent progression, 0/400. Talent, Windstride. Talent class, A. Talent, True. Name, Legs of the Wind. Description, the wind has no feet, but with you, it walks pompously, lightly treading and navigating the path which ease. Talent ability, Velocity Dash, Shuanpa, Time Warp, Sonic Surge, Breeze. Attribute, Way of the Wind. Talent progression, 0/600. Copied talent -1. Talent, Erasure. Class, B. Talent, True. Name. Forgotten curse. Description. A livid curse that plagues all it sets its eyes upon. Talent ability. Lock. Unlock.
Attributes, potencial.
Talent progression. 0/500. These were all the talents he currently had in his repertoire, both copied and owned. He took a few seconds to glance through all of them, then brought his eyes back to the panel that mattered right now. Then he deposited 400 talent fragments into the Soul Eyes talent progression. Immediately a new panel appeared over it. Do you want to evolve talent? Soul Eyes, C class, to talent. Soul Sight, B class. Sure, why not? Evolving talent. The panel persisted for a while, then disappeared and appeared again. Congratulations! Do you have evolved talent? Soul Eyes, C class, to talent. Soul Sight, B class. Own talent -3. Talent, Soul Sight. Class, B. Talent, True. Name. The Blind Song. Description. A melody in the distant horizons beckons to lead the unsightly into a world beyond. Talent ability. Soul C. Attributes. Danger sense. Talent progression. 0/500. He didn't gain more abilities, but something had definitely happened to the one that was there before, and the attribute. Northern didn't need to be told, before he knew it. Instantly, as the ability evolved, not just did the perception from his 5 senses increase to an abnormal level, and that feeling that he was having a couple of minutes earlier instantly became much clearer, and he could feel it contributing to the potency of the void force that had instantaneously weaved itself around him. Northern could now not just perceive things but explicitly perceive dangers before they occur. It was good progress, but sadly Northern did not seem to be in the mood for any celebration. Because of his acute sense of danger was why he knew exactly what was wrong this time. He got off Mr. Fluffy and patted the beast's fur, then said to him, "I'm sorry, pal. I don't want to abandon you, but I'm being left with no choice. I'll have you sit this one out." But the beast growled in protest, eyes focused with determination. Northern could tell what those eyes were saying. Mr. Fluffy was not ready to go anywhere. Not this time, not ever. Northern was particularly concerned because he didn't just know what was in that depth. His danger sense could pick up the magnitude of the threat it imposed. And that was why he could tell without having to look into the water. It was a monster much stronger than the Kirathon. He didn't want to compare it to the vile monster that had caused him to lose his ship. That was on another level. And if not for the surplus soul cores that were wasted, it probably wouldn't be dead. But thanks to that event, Northern gained a handsome lot and was currently reviewing a couple of uses of soul cores in his mind. Although he had not really given it an extensive thought, as this is not the time. The sandworm was probably much stronger. For some reason, the nearest description he could bring himself to use was none other than the Kirathon. But Northern knew what was in that depth, which was why the situation was even more consuming. Except if the horror in the depth of that ocean had suddenly grown to maturity in a couple of months, there's no way it should have such imposing presence. Northern smacked his fists together and cracked his knuckles. Well, to what does it matter? I'm just going to kill it anyway. He bolted and walked forward with Mr. Fluffy cautiously following him. The beast seemed to crouch lower and lower as they neared the river bank. When they reached 5 meters away from the edge, Mr. Fluffy refused to go any further. The white beast slowly crouched down with its ears lowered. Northern, concerned, observed the beast's behavior and looked back into the river. Its surface was clean and clear, reflecting the sky and its properties. But Northern's danger sense was even now more vivid than ever. It made his head throb and the back of his neck cold. There's no way I can be mistaken. There's something in the depth of that river. Something not accounted for. Northern was suddenly prompted to remember the monsters he fought. He had never met their type in the rift or anywhere around before leaving. Now Northern sighed and managed to caress the silver necklace that was hidden within the layers of his armor. After which he looked at the water and jumped into it. Northern dropped low into the water, bubbles forming out of his mouth. It was difficult to breathe at first. The silver necklace around his neck, however, began to glow, and Northern found himself easily breathing as if it were regular air down there. He looked down into the dark depth of the river and began to dive deeper into it. After swimming for a few more minutes, he paused. The depth was not just any other depth. It was very dark and ominous. Northern decided to not go further but instead use Chaos Eyes. And he did. Something familiar struck him. Immediately, the reality dawned on him. He shot up, desperately propelling himself to regain air power. But the tendrils were faster than he was, coiling around his legs before he could go far and pulling him into the depths. Chapter 379. The Deciding Night, Part 3. Meeting an Old Friend, Part 2. Northern felt the cold, slimy tendrils coil around his legs, dragging him deeper into the dark abyss of the river. He struggled to break free, but the grip was strong, pulling him with relentless force. He opened up his hand and materialized the dark stiletto, knowing that in these murky waters, speed and precision would be his allies. The pressure of the water increased as he was pulled further down, his ears popping painfully. Definitely, he had no trouble breathing, but the darkness was oppressive, and his visibility was limited. As he activated his Chaos Eyes, the world around him subtly shifted to reveal the true nature of his surroundings. The murky water became clearer, the tendrils pulling him down more visible. Northern slashed at the tendrils with his dark stiletto, the blade slicing through the thick, rubbery appendages. The creature responded with a violent jerk, pulling him closer to its massive body. As he descended, he caught sight of the monstrosity. It was somewhat like a mutated octopus, its tentacles covered in barbed spikes, its body pulsating with a sickly green glow. The creature was more than just a monster. It was an abomination, a devastator, corrupted by some unknown force. With a swift movement, Northern twisted his body, cutting through another tendril. The water around him clouded with dark, inky blood, the devastator shrieking in pain, the sound vibrating through the water. He used the brief moment of distraction to propel himself away, but the creature was relentless. More tendrils shot out, aiming to ensnare him once more. Northern's mind raced as he dodged through the tendrils. Of course, he was insightful enough to know that he could breathe did not mean he could win this battle in the water. He needed to find a way to bring the fight to the surface. Whatever this abomination was, it knew very much that this was its territory. Northern didn't think it would be willing to follow him, which meant he needed to outsmart it. Now, as far as the topic of smartness goes, Northern could not confidently raise his head in that regard. But it wasn't like this situation really gave him a choice. He looked down at the monster, vision cleared from the obscuring darkness. He noticed the creature's glowing eyes, and an idea formed. He maneuvered through the water, dodging the lashing tendrils, and swam towards the creature's head. As he got closer, he could see the central eye, a massive, glowing orb that radiated like the source of anything's power. The devastator roared, sensing his intent, and unleashed a barrage of tentacles. Northern weaved through them with agility, using the stiletto to fend off the attacks. He focused on the glowing eye, knowing it was his best chance. A detrimental attack to where it hurts would give him a moment away from the devastator. If it works out well, this vicious water mogul will get enraged, lose whatever sense it has and follow him to the surface. With a powerful thrust, he drove the stiletto into the eye, twisting the blade. The creature convulsed, its tentacles flailing wildly. Northern was thrown back by the force of the creature's thrashing. He managed to regain his bearings, swimming rapidly away from the wounded beast. The devastator's screams echoed through the water, a sound of pure agony. But it wasn't over yet. The creature, blinded and enraged, began to lash out indiscriminately, the water churning with its fury. Northern felt a sharp pain as one of the barbed tentacles grazed the vambrace of the twilight dawn, leaving a deep gash. He grimaced but didn't let the pain slow him down. He needed to get to the surface to regroup and plan his next move. He swam upwards, but the devastator was not ready to let him go. It surged after him, its massive body creating a powerful current that threatened to drag him back down. Oh crap! What the hell? The mere force of the creature's movement was like a command to the water bodies. Swimming seemed to get harder. It was like all water itself was clawing at Northern's body to slow him down enough for the Devastator to catch up. And Northern didn't intend on having that. He narrowed his eyes, that slowly glowed with an ethereal azure light, and muttered. Sonic surge. Northern blasted forward through the water like a propeller. His force resonated in the whole depth, and from the way the waters vibrated and formed bubbles, one could tell two major invisible forces were causing turmoil within the depth of the river. On the surface, the turmoil began to reflect. The water surface began to dance and bubble up like something gripped the water by the neck and began to suffocate what was left of the little air it had retained in it. Meanwhile, on the riverbank, Mr. Fluffy was focusedly observing this. He dug his claws into the ground with blue eyes, fiercely determined to jump at anything the moment it came out. Although the depth of those courageous blue eyes was still a suppressed fear. Even though Northern had created enough force to propel himself faster, there was a limit to that. On land, Sonic Surge sure would have propelled him miles faster than, but underwater, his movement was heavily restricted. He was close to the riverbank, but he still had the Devastator on his tail, closing in on him with an enraged flare. Northern desperately looked around, searching for anything he could use to his advantage. As he spotted a cluster of sharp rocks jutting out from the riverbed, an idea sparked in his head. He swam towards the rocks, the Devastator hot on his heels. As he neared the rocks, he timed his move perfectly, darting between the jagged edges. The creature, blinded and frenzied, crashed into the rocks, impaling itself on the sharp points. The water around them turned dark with blood, the Devastator's movements growing weaker. Northern didn't wait to see if it was dead. He continued his ascent, his lungs burning from the exertion despite the necklace's aid. He broke the surface of the water, gasping for air, the cool night air filling his lungs. Immediately, Mr. Fluffy darted towards him and pulled him with fangs onto the riverbank. Northern collapsed on the sand, despite breathing underwater. His lungs still burned, and exhaustion burrowed deeply into them. He flinched and quickly propped himself up. As he did, a clone appeared beside him and materialized stainless. Northern's armor shattered into black sparks, and from the flow of those sparks coalesced another vicious and dark metallic armor, much more formidable than this one. He held Granger, focused his azure eyes on the surface of the water and muttered, "It's coming." Chapter 380. The Deciding Night, Part 4. Meeting an Old Friend, Part 3. The surface of the river rippled violently as the Devastator emerged, its massive, pulsating body breaking through the water like an ominous specter. The moonlight glinted off its barbed tentacles, each one thrashing wildly in search of its target. Northern stood, his muscles tensed and ready, his armor glinting with a dark, almost malevolent sheen. "Stay back," Northern commanded Mr. Fluffy, his voice firm but calm. The beast hesitated, his eyes reflecting a mix of loyalty and fear. With a low growl, Mr. Fluffy retreated a few steps, ready to leap into action if necessary. Northern's azure eyes locked onto the Devastator's glowing, bloodshot ones. He could see the hatred and pain radiating from the creature, its rage palpable. It almost felt as if it had a personal grudge against him. The riverbank trembled as the monster hauled itself further onto the land, its immense weight causing the ground to shudder. Northern's grip tightened around Granger, the twin blades on both edges humming with an essence that seemed to resonate with his own chaos. He took a deep breath, centering himself, then dashed forward, his movements a blur of speed and precision. The first tentacle lashed out, but Northern was already moving. He sidestepped the attack, twirling Granger as he scaled along the side and slicing through the appendage with a swift, practiced motion. The Devastator roared, its scream a guttural, otherworldly sound that reverberated through the night. Northern's clone, without a waste of time, dashed forward and joined the fray, mirroring his movements perfectly. Together, they danced around the creature, striking at its vulnerable spots with ruthless efficiency. The clone's slightly curved blade clanged against the Devastator's hide, sending sparks around with each powerful strike. The Devastator, though blinded, seemed to adapt quickly. It reared back, then slammed its tentacles down in a sweeping arc, attempting to crush both Northern and his clone in one devastating blow. Northern rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the impact, while his clone deflected the tentacles with a series of precise parries. Without a moment of respite, Northern charged forward, aiming for the creature's head, but the Devastator anticipated his move. It swung a barbed tentacle with lightning speed, catching Northern off guard and sending him sprawling across the sand. Pain exploded in Northern's side as he skidded to a halt. He gritted his teeth, pushing himself up just in time to see the clone being entangled by several tentacles. With a flick of his wrist, Northern sent a surge of black flames that began to devour the monster's tentacles like a rabid bat. The Devastator let out a heart-wrenching morbid cry, writhing in deep pain. But Northern did not care. His focus was cut to a sharpened edge as he skillfully rotated the twin-bladed staff and shot forward again. Halfway closer to the hideous creature, Northern dashed forward with an outburst of speed, spinning his sword again as he began to carve deep lacerations on the monster's seemingly impenetrable hide. The Devastator howled in pain and frustration, its massive body convulsing as it lashed out wildly. Northern seized the opportunity, plunging Grenger deep into the creature's side. Dark, inky blood spurted from the wound, splattering across the sand and staining the riverbank. The creature reared back, its remaining tentacles flailing in a desperate attempt to dislodge Northern. But he held firm, his eyes blazing with determination. With a swift, calculated motion, he twisted the blade, driving it deeper into the Devastator's flesh. A tentacle whipped towards him, but Northern's clone intercepted it, taking the brunt of the impact. The clone staggered, its form flickering, but it held its ground, slashing at the offending appendage with ruthless efficiency. Northern felt the creature's strength waning, its movements growing sluggish and uncoordinated. He narrowed his eyes, with a final powerful thrust. He drove Grenger into the creature's heart, the blade pulsing with an ominous energy. For a second, silence reigned over their landscape and Northern actually thought he had gotten the vicious monster. But the Devastator wouldn't close its eyes and even seemed to be glaring into his own eyes. He could see in the creature's bloodshot, dying eyes, a refusal to give up. Hatred, grudge, a passion and madness that can only be caused by the lust for vengeance. He could have been mistaken, but he was sure that monster had it in for him. With a bitter taste in his mouth, he pulled out his weapon, causing the creature's gore to stain the sand even more. Its strength reduced greatly and its entire body came crashing down, causing the ground to tremble a little bit. Northern spun the twin-bladed staff, splashing off the black gore. He gave the monster a last glance, having to deal with an unsettling feeling he felt. Alas, he couldn't just let it go. After walking a couple of steps away from the dying creature, he paused and looked back, peering into its soul with his newly evolved soul sight. Monster profile, infected. Name: Juvenile Devastator host, the Kirathon parasite. True name: Nil. Rank: Destroyer, Maelstrom. Danger level: Disaster, Apex. Attributes: Nil. Abilities: Nil. Note: this is an incomplete process. The juvenile Devastator is still fighting for its life. The moment it dies, the Kirathon takes control of its body and abilities. Northern's mouth fell slightly open, and no words could fill in for how shocked and surprised he was. Of course, he had suspected that the damn thing survived, but he didn't think it survived this way. And it had even managed to enter into the body of a destroyer rank monster. The underwater bully really is a big deal. No wonder Raven did not confront it then, because she knew she would not win. However, his situation just got entirely worse. Perhaps he had this battle a little bit easy because the Devastator itself was already dying and busy fighting for its life with the Kirathon. But thanks to Northern, he lost that battle and things just got thrown down the gutter. If the extra note that Northern saw was any bit correct, it meant that any minute from now, the entire mass of that monster will start to rise. because all that was needed for the Kirathon to win the fight was for the Devastator itself to die. Now, Northern would have to fight an enemy again, one that has done nothing but dreaded the day they would meet again. He exhaled, exasperated. Oh damn! If you want access to fast updates or the full novel in high-quality audio, contact me now and buy. I offer over 300 complete audiobooks from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, and more. No locked episodes, no subscriptions, just one-time payment via PayPal or Ko-fi. Message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out the full list of available novels on Discord. Start listening to your next favorite audiobook today.